much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks, with the People's Pundit. I'm, of course, your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. It's Friday, so get your questions in. Laura will be here in like 10, 15 minutes. She may have jumped in already to grab your questions and throw them in a little private chat for me to look at. But we'll do that later in the show, of course. Coming up, we're going to have John O'Shea. He's going to return to talk to us. A big hit last time he was on the show, and I'm glad to have him back. And Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen reports, oh my God, pollsters talk to each other. A horrendous day. And we're going to compare polling trends of what we have seen the last, year or so, maybe even more. All right. And then generally in our experience, what do these polling trends mean? All right. I do want to talk a little bit more about Wisconsin because I've got more since then. But before that, all right, I saw something on Twitter earlier I want to bring up. All right, and I want to show people video footage, Ollie London, hat tip, Ollie London. We had done polling on this, and this is something, unfortunately, we didn't have the segment, which I had this vision of bringing the segment on of all these different women, and then we could go over the polling. That never happened. Maybe we'll reach out to her again. I've met the one who's the focus of this video, Riley Reed, and sweet girl, but generally speaking, there's this narrative right now that there's all of this violence being perpetuated on the trans community. All right. And, Tucker Carlson has been maybe the one and only person in mainstream media who's pushed back on it. So here's Riley Reed in San Francisco giving a speech on women's rights in sports. And I want to play the reaction because we're supposed to recognize this week International Asexuality Day. Last week or whenever it was International Trans Day, whatever, the Trans Day of Violence, which you could get banned for saying, even though it was on their own pamphlet. All right, let's play this, and we'll talk about it more when we get back.
Yeah, you fucking transphobic bitch. I fucking see it. It's just me. I'm good. I'm good. I'm coming. I'm good. Trust me, I'm good. Go ahead. You crying! You fucking crying, bitch! Fuck you! Fuck you!
I should have said foul language, Warner. Viewer discretion advised, and I'm sorry. I should have done that. But I imagine, if we were going to play a video like this, you would just assume that language would be there. You know what? I think we've actually played enough of it. I don't really want to give too much credence to this. This isn't going to help the cause of whether or not you have a mental problem or whether or not you feel like you're being oppressed. We're going to have something more on this, hopefully by next week. We're trying to do the right thing here and take our time with it, but Locals knows, especially the Locals Book Club, that we've been reviewing something for somebody to basically check the statistical accuracy of some of the findings, because it's something that was being used in Europe largely, and then it put us in another direction of whether or not this is true. Is this narrative true? What you will find generally is not what the media is going to tell you, and I'm going to leave some of that out there for a tease. But ironically, this is again one of these cultural issues that overwhelmingly Americans agree with Riley on this issue, but the loud, the over, because the idea is that they're underrepresented or something. Like, we did this entire study on commercials, whether or not under, how could I put it, but groups that are supposed to be at-risk groups are really not truly represented in media and entertainment, in commercials, in movies that are coming out. And so are certain demographics overrepresented? And I think what you're going to see next week is that it's a very clear-cut case of, once again, the group that's supposed to be the victim group is in fact overrepresented. All right. So here we have outsized voices getting the attention of the media, getting the attention of sympathetic journalists, sympathetic think tanks, right? And the will of the majority is just forsaken for this cause, for this ideology. And, this, what? Again, Laura, I would love to see if we could circle back and see if we can get, she was not alone. She was just going to be one of many guests that we wanted to have on the show to discuss this, because followers of the Public Polling Project, you know where the American public stands on this. This is not close. All right. Americans do not feel that biological men should be able to compete with biological women. Not in the Olympics, not in college, not in high school for a scholarship, which of course brings this conversation forward, folks. This is why we do this with the Public Polling Project. We're the only ones who ask questions like this and others. The Central Intelligence Agency question we got flack over, the adverse effects question. There's so many issues that we're willing to touch that nobody else is. All right. And when it comes to this issue, we knew where this was headed. So if there's no legal separation, or society doesn't view any end to the slippery slope, then how many Americans are truly ready to see biological males who claim to be female putting their hands on biological females? And what you just saw right there was the inevitable end result of what we talked about over a year and a half. What is it? Almost 2 years ago now, Laura? When did we start asking that question? Almost 2 years ago. If you're okay with biological men who think they're women competing with Riley Reid, then you're okay with biological women getting in the octagon with men and getting their face beat in by them. Or biological men who say they identify as women getting in the octagon with biological women and beating their faces in. Somehow, this is not what I think the leaders of the women's suffrage movement had in mind. This is not what they had. You know what? I have an equal right to get my face beat in by a man like you do. So here it's okay for them to put their hands on a woman because they don't distinguish the difference between an actual biological woman and someone who was born a man who now thinks they are a woman. These are very uncomfortable conversations, but we're going to have them. Because the left's tactic is clear. Violence and shoutdowns. Violence and shoutdowns. Violence and shoutdowns. Folks, this is what they've been doing for 50 years. You don't see it? This is the playbook. We know the American public doesn't agree with us, so instead we're just going to bully into submission the majority. And it's an overwhelming majority. It's not close. Americans are not ready for this yet. It's a major, and I don't think they'll ever be ready for it. Just like they were never ready for Roe v. Wade. You can't enforce cultural changes like this. You can't force them to occur. Anyway, we'll revisit this. Listen, and again, all this comes down to a failure of leadership. Does it not? It all comes down to a failure of leadership. Whether it's the banking crisis, big issues that have to be tackled to save the economy from ruin. Former President Trump, now the front runner for the Republican nomination, now leading Biden in basically every single poll, has been pivoting in this last week since the indictment into really talking about how, and today he said it, I don't know if by the time I am president again, this is going to be fixable. This country may collapse because if the petrodollar goes down, then it's all over, because it is. You don't get a $31 trillion debt, folks, 30 trillion plus. You don't get to have a $30 trillion debt if you are no longer the standard for global currency, especially when it comes to energy. Then all of a sudden, people want you to basically show them the receipts of how you intend to pay this debt off. We talked about this in a very detailed conversation with John O'Shea on Inside the Numbers last time he was on, and I want to welcome again John to the show because he's got big news. John, thanks so much for joining Inside the Numbers, my friend. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thanks, Rich, so much. I appreciate you having me back on, and a blessed Good Friday to you and your family.
John, the last time you were on, we had a big conversation, a big, deep, thorough conversation about the not only the failures of the banking industry. Your experience made you uniquely qualified to talk about this, but overall the general concept of not having leaders who are serious enough or big enough to rise to the challenge and deal with these issues like adults before they come crashing down on us, and that we have very little time to right the ship, to steer the ship straight now. All right, so I know you have something to say, something to tell everybody. I'm just going to give you the floor, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right, and the decline in this country is only accelerating. And you just mentioned about losing the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency, and that's happening at a accelerating pace. In fact, Total, the French energy company, just announced that they were buying liquefied natural gas from China and paying in the yuan as well. So now we even have allies piling in on that. But, I agree. I think the direction of this country is alarming. I think that there are too many people who are unfortunately just standing by and shaking their heads. It's something that I've long given consideration to. In fact, I pray every day asking God to just make me an instrument and to do his will and to bring glory. And on this topic about this country, I feel like we're losing divine providence, that we're headed in the wrong direction, and that we do need new leadership that will come back and take us back to our prominence so that we can be that shining city on the hill. So it's with that in mind that I now announce formally here on your show, which seems apropos, that I have filed paperwork and I am formally entering the race to run for Texas 12th Congressional District.
Well, I'll tell you, the studio erupted. The audience, especially those who are familiar with you, that you were on last time. I cannot tell you, John, the ravings that we got having you on. People really thought that you got it, that you got the core of not just the issues that we're facing, but the reasons that we are facing them. There's symptoms, John, and then there are root causes of disease. And why don't you get into a little bit about. First of all, before we do that, I would like to show you a little bit of something I found. All right. Okay. And I think we actually had spoken about this before, but this is what I think most voters, Republican, Independent, Democrat, this is a perfect example. Your opponent, the incumbent, all right, that they really just cannot stand anymore. All right. So Republicans run to be on a certain platform. Democrats run, they have a certain platform. Yet it is repeatedly examples that we can point to with incumbents on the Republican side where they don't hold true to that platform. And it's like the longer you're in there, the worse it gets. But this is something from Texas, right? 4 Republicans voted to support federal education bureaucracy. This is a stabbing of the back of, going back to Reagan, John, right? Tony Gonzalez, John Carter, Michael McCall, and who would be your opponent is your opponent now. Kay Granger, the incumbent in this district, sided with Democrats on a bill that was filed by Kentucky U.S. Representative Thomas Massie. It would have terminated the department's authority on or before December 31st, 2023. And yet Kay Granger voted against it. And I really want to, is it this, a lot of people wouldn't run against an incumbent. I'd like you to speak a little bit about why you think it's time for somebody to challenge Kay Granger.
Well, I think there are people here in this district who have felt like it's long been time. And in fact, she did actually have a serious challenger in 2020, a guy named Chris Putnam, who actually I met with and turned out to like quite a bit. In fact, he and I are very similar kind of guys. But unfortunately, Chris ran as an America First candidate. And as the situation dictated, President Trump needed Kay Granger's vote. And so he officially, near the end of the campaign, endorsed Kay. And it's kind of hard to run as an America First candidate against an incumbent who received President Trump's endorsement. So he ended up losing by about 12,000 votes, whereas previously he had been winning in the polls. But, the real reason, and there's nothing I'm very loath to attack a fellow Republican, even though there's some debate. I mean, she was a Democrat previously. She has done some good things for this district. She had been the mayor, and most people regarded her as a very good mayor. But to your point, you get to DC and you spend time in there, and unfortunately, you look into the abyss and the abyss stares back. And she's now in her 14th term. And as you said, I don't think that she represents the America First values. She's very establishment. She's virulently anti-Trump. She originally endorsed Jeb Bush. When President Trump received the Republican nomination, she refused to endorse him. And in fact, prior to the election, said that he should withdraw. And then after receiving his endorsement, she was only the second person in Capitol Hill to say that Trump had lost and he needed to get over it and needed to leave. In fact, she said it second only to Mitt Romney. So that gives you an idea. In fact, another idea of what kind of Republican she is that when Chris Putnam did challenge her in the 2020 race, he kind of bled her account down. And I think she was startled because she hadn't really faced a serious challenger before. So what did she do to go replenish her coffers? She went out on a barnstorming tour, not here in the district, but across the country with Liz Cheney. I think that kind of tells you all you need to know about her.
And yet, when we saw this indictment of the former president come down, and right before President Trump's speech in Waco, this was before that, there was a list the president put out of people who had his back. We were all expecting at that point anyway for the DA in Manhattan to indict him. I didn't see her name on that list. I saw somebody you know him quite well. I saw Ken Paxton. I did not see Kay Granger's name on that list.
No, I think, I have it on good authority that Kay is somebody who is not in President Trump's good favor. And in fact, ironically, even after receiving that endorsement, she was absent for the vote and refused to vote via proxy and said, well, Republicans don't vote for, using the proxy method. And yet throughout that congressional session, then she voted via proxy over a dozen times. So again, just disingenuous and frankly, kind of a betrayal of the person who had supported her and helped her get reelected.
Just so people understand the district here and where you are, John, I mean, you are the largest Republican populated area in the country. I mean, that's just so people understand. Tarrant County, big county that is still very Republican. Whereas, you have the Dallas area, you have the Fort Worth area, and a very healthy competition between the two, right? I mean, even though people say Dallas, Fort Worth. Generally speaking, one of the things we did get into leadership and the difference in this generation that is not meeting these challenges. She's been there a long time. You just pointed out. What's your take or what's your feeling? And I know, but let the audience know where you stand on careerism when it comes to DC specifically, but in politics, where if you got elected in this area to represent this area, what would be your thoughts on how long you'd stay in DC? What you would generally aim to achieve there?
Well, it's ironic. I actually didn't really ever want to go run for public office, but I felt a calling for it. So, it's not something that I enter into lightly, and it's not something that I crave for a career. In fact, I think part of the problem that this country has right now is that we have a professional class of politicians, which is what our founding fathers never envisioned. So what my pledge is that I am running specifically to support the 2024 Republican president. We all know right now, it's clear, it's going to be Donald Trump. This is an America First movement. This is his movement. He needs the support. He knows what it's going to take to roll back this administrative state and return power back to the hands of we the people. For that, I'm willing to give up my ownership as a citizen and become a servant. But my pledge is that I plan on running, if the good people of this district will have me, for 4 years, 2 terms. That's it. What I hope to do with this campaign, actually, and our campaign manager is your good friend, Don Smith, who I actually got introduced to via you and your show. But Don and I hope to do a series of videos and broadcasts kind of showing what it takes to actually run a campaign and how, what the inner workings are behind it. Because right now, I think it's too nebulous for people in general. And what I hope to accomplish is encourage a wave of people to get in off the sidelines because their country needs them right now. I think that, the first 100 people into any business or factory right now, I think I would take over the first 100 politicians walking into, the halls of Congress. We need common sense. We need America values. And right now, I feel like that's just lacking in DC, with some notable exceptions. And there are some very good Congress people here from Texas. But right now, I think that we need more. And I'm going to try and do all I can to try and encourage that wave of growing sentiment that people need to grab the wheel back from the hands of this ruling oligarch that we have right now.
If they saw the last episode, then viewers are a little bit familiar about what you did because you didn't have any aspirations to be a politician. You very much, like the former president, were just a successful private sector businessman. If they were watching before, they did see a little bit about your experience in the private sector, turning around the bank that was in deep trouble, which is what led to that conversation we had about the banking crisis last time. But since then, you've done quite a lot, and you've been successful at it. So why don't you tell people a little bit about what you've been up to? Because it doesn't include politics. And I think we need more of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And fortunately, I'm hearing a groundswell of people across the country. People I talk to who are speaking to other groups. I've had the opportunity to speak before a couple of groups, and you can sense that there is an awareness. I mean, if there's any good that can come out of the last 2 years, is there's this dichotomy of what it was like in this country under President Trump and an America First leadership versus where we are now with this kind of global woke populism, or not populism, global woke, authoritarianism, frankly. And so what I had been doing, I actually, my wife, unfortunately, had a very serious health issue. She suffered brain cancer. We saved her, but unfortunately, she's very much disabled. And so I took some time away to go and raise my kids and get them kind of out of their former life. And we went exploring down through South America. So we had a chance to see different cultures and different countries and their different values and raise the kids. And when I got back, my partners welcomed me back with open arms. And we ended up doing something, building in kind of the construction area here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This is an area that has very explosive growth. Texas is a very conservative state, very well run. So we experience a lot of positive migration coming in and a lot of job creation. So what we've done is we've built a company with different partners where we're into real estate development. We actually have our own construction company. We have a couple of quarries. In fact, one that we just opened up about this time last year. And then we have a concrete company. So very much, out of the political realm, so to speak. But like I said, what God told me was it was time to stop yelling at the TV from the couch, and it was time to actually get more involved. And with encouragement from some people like my good friend Ken Paxton, I've decided that my country needed me, and if that meant taking a time away from my life that I enjoy my anonymity, but. And look, I'm not naive. I understand as an America First candidate taking on an establishment incumbent, I'm going to receive all kinds of slings and arrows. But it's up to me to do my part. I can't just let other brave people sit there and take it. And courage is contagious, and so I hope to encourage other people to consider equally entering into the fray.
It is indeed. And I think that's the one thing that perhaps the most dangerous about the former president's movement is that, and even after, his loss in 2020, it brought all of these new people out that I think otherwise would not have, from local school board levels all the way up to the national level that you're putting yourself forward for now. With the national level in mind, John, what do you think are the three? I mean, we talked a lot about this last time, but what do you think are the three biggest problems, or not even, maybe you think it's one, problem that this country faces right now? I mean, I hate to bring it up again, but it's worth bringing up. The former president just on True Social said, by the time I'm looking at this and by the time I get back, this may be far worse than we ever thought it was. And it would be harder to write. It's not 2016, right? The petrodollar could collapse. I mean, there's just so much that we're looking at. What do you think are the biggest challenges this country faces right now, or something that needs to be addressed more than anything?
Well, I think first of all, we need to restore our sovereignty, and that includes locking down the borders and knowing who we have actually entering into our country. I mean, a nation without borders is not a nation at all, and that also includes, kind of
Amen.
this dangerous flirtation that we have with groups like the World Health Organization and the United Nations, and ceding over our sovereignty to these organizations. Look, nobody elected Dr. Tedros to have any kind of say over their lives here in this country. And so why our ruling oligarchs think that or the World Economic Forum or anybody else should have any say in who we are, how we govern our country, and how we live our lives is absolutely beyond me. So I think that's first and foremost. Then I think the second thing is that we need to get the spending and under control, and we need to do everything we can to shore up the dollar. I mean, the collapse of the dollar as a global reserve currency would be just a tremendous tragedy. And once you lose it, you don't get it back. Just ask the British what they, have had to endure ever since the pound was lost. It used to be said, sound as a pound. And now, then it fell to the US dollar. And if the US dollar is no longer the global reserve currency, well, then guess what? We can't just print money magically. And then also all of the US dollars held overseas won't have the buying power overseas. So they'll come flooding back into this country. And if you think we have inflation now, we're talking about hyperinflation, maybe along the lines of Argentina. So I think restoring our sovereignty, getting our economic house in order, and then, we just absolutely have to do something about the way that we're projecting our strength and that we're meddling in overseas and foreign, involvement. If it's, the debacle of the absolute Afghanistan disgrace and our withdrawal there, which ended up costing service people their lives needlessly, which armed the Taliban with $85 billion worth of, cutting edge military hardware and handing over the Bagram Air Base to the Chinese Communist Party, or if it's allowing this alliance of other countries to form against us, especially in response to our involvement in the Ukraine war. I know it's not popular, and I wish that there wasn't an armed conflict going on, but who here thinks that if President Trump had been in the White House, there would have actually been an invasion to begin with? I mean, I said it on your show last time, and I'll say it again. The only president in the 21st century that Putin didn't invade a neighboring country on was, President Trump, because under George W. Bush, under Obama, and now under Biden, Putin has seen this, military invasions. And you had brought up the point the last time. It's not that he's looking to restore the former Soviet empire. It's that we've been meddling in affairs. We our color revolution with the CIA and Victoria Nuland, led to the removal of a democratically elected, president in Ukraine who was pro-Russia and replaced with one that was pro-West. And then now you've seen this kind of constant tampering and meddling in these foreign affairs have done nothing but diminish our weakness overseas. And in fact, our allies right now are really nervous. And that's why you have like Macron going over to visit with, Premier Xi over in China and accepting a deal where they're buying liquefied natural gas with yuan. And frankly, our enemies are banding together. I mean, the whole group that's looking at forming alternative monetary policy includes Saudi Arabia and Iran, which China actually brokered a peace agreement with, which is incomprehensible in and of itself. But the U.S. has been absent, and of course nature reports a vacuum. So who's gone rushing in but China, and they're allying the rest of the world against us right now. So I think those three things are the most critical. But frankly, it's almost like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. I mean, there's just so many raging infernos right now going on, and it's all been self-inflicted. That's the part that's the most egregious to me.
That's right.
Is that Biden was handed a great situation by President Trump. Inflation was under control. Our border was secure. There was global peace. Our economy was recovering nicely. In fact, the only thing that was really hindering it at that point in time were certain governors that were still refusing to open up their states because I guess they just enjoyed the power trip that the emergency use authorizations had provided them. But, everything was in good stead. And now look at us now. And I ask you, I mean, can you point to one single aspect of this government or our country right now that you feel good about?
Yeah, you said something too right off the kicker, which is when it comes to being the global currency, the standard, the British are a great example. I think about this all the time. Once it goes, it doesn't
Doesn't
come
come back.
back. You're not getting it back. So the time we have to right this ship is narrowing. The window's narrowing, and it's doing so very quickly. And it's just not going to happen with this group of leaders, this government, right, left. So many of these people just have proven time and again they are not up to this challenge. It's not going to happen. New leadership needs to come in and has to deal with these issues before it's too late. And frankly, we're getting very close. So this next election is extremely important. I don't care what you have after your last name. So John, I'm honored that you came on. I'm excited for your decision. I wish you all the best. I want you back, of course, on the show to talk and keep us up to date. But tell people where they can find more about you and how to keep up with what you're doing.
Sure. Actually, they can go to my website, o'sheafortexas.com. There they'll have all my social media. The website just actually went live today. And so we'll be posting new material there, and they can follow me on all the different platforms. We'll be posting on all of them regularly. And I look forward to getting out and getting to meet people and listening to their concerns and finding ways that we can address this. But, for our nation's sake right now, I God bless President Trump for trying to pull a Grover Cleveland, but I think this country needs that kind of America First leadership. And I think he's the Cincinnatus of our time that can step back up and kind of right this. But he's right. It's going to take all hands on deck. And this is not going to be as easy as it was in 2016. The amount of carnage and destruction that this feckless administration has waged over the last couple of years is going to be a very difficult task.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't add anything else to that. Come back again soon, John. I'll see you soon. Come back again soon. I'm excited for you. Wish you all the best, my friend. And thanks for coming on. And again, I'm honored that you came on here to announce this decision. It's a big deal.
It kind of seemed like it started here watching your show. And so it seemed apropos. And so all my love to you and your family. And I'll look forward to seeing you. And thanks again for having me on.
All the best from Laura and I. And we'll see you soon. All the best. John O'Shea, ladies and gentlemen. Go check out his website. Follow him on social media. I'll tell you right now. I know, John, this is what this country is going to need. A bunch of new people who are successful in their own lives and not aspiring to be politicians. Didn't go to Yale to be a politician. I mean, there might as well just be classes. They all follow the same pipelines. We need real people who understand the real world impact of what is going to happen if this ship is not righted soon. If you think that we are exempt from history, you are sadly mistaken. And listen to something he just said. Take anything away from what he just said. Once we lose this status, you don't get it back. There are tons of examples of Cincinnatus, Grover Clevelands. If you look throughout history, there are no examples of great powers who fall from the great power podium and then get back up on it. Once they're gone, and that's a wrap. All right. So not to sound, no, I want to sound dire, because that is the seriousness of this situation. All right. I'm so glad I can't even say I'm, again, honored that John came on here to do that. Let's talk about what he brought up, which is the 2024 election. I'm so glad to have him on. I mean, look, never do we have. When was the last time you saw a Pollster and Pollster segment? Never, right? So I'm going to go ahead and bring on the chief pollster from Rasmussen Reports, Mark Mitchell. How are you, my friend? Thanks for joining Inside the Numbers.
It's great to be on here. Yeah, is there going to be some kind of like astronomical anomaly now that the two pollsters are talking together? And I need to clear the air first about how much we're allowed to geek out. Are we going to get into the numbers, or are we going to talk big, broad arcs here?
I think we're going to do both. I really do. Because I watched, I watched your segment with Steve earlier in the week, and it's amazing because again, for people who don't know, I know they probably don't. The media doesn't like it, but pollsters talk to each other. All right, and when something's significant, we tend to say, "Hey, are you seeing this?" Kind of thing. And when we did our public polling project that we released, we had the primary, we had the general, something looked very different, Mark, to me. different than 2016, different than 2020, and different than what we had been seeing for the last 2 years when we've been doing these head-to-heads, a year and a half. So I saw your segment with Steve, and I thought, let me have you on so we can really get into this and talk about the swing, because this is not something you see all the time. I mean, let's just start with that broad 100,000 foot view. The swing that you guys measured in your latest 2024 matchup. First of all, give people the top line number, but then, tell them why that's significant.
The swing that you're talking about, the real swing might have been the one in February, not the one right now. So the outlier was the
Explain
one.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So people are asking probably, why would you do a 2024 hypothetical rematch 6 months after the election? Well, you have to look at it as a tracking question. Opinion changes, even the samples change over a cycle. And the kind of people that answer my poll a week after a crushing defeat in the election are very different than the kind of people that would have answered the poll 2 weeks earlier, right before the election. But what it gets to tell you is when you ask Biden approval, there's only so much information to glean from that. And it's like, this guy, a lot of objectively bad stuff is happening to the country, but some people just see him on the news and see him speak and think, well, it's not his fault. But when you ask if you're going to vote for Trump versus Biden, and you're going to get a very clear signal about the relative position of, let's just say, in public opinion of what people think about Trump and Biden. And so our polling, and we don't play with the weights a lot, they're relatively stable, and we disclose them. And with the same weights that we came somewhat close. 2020 was a hard election, but we had Biden winning the popular vote. So we got it directionally correct. With that same set of weightings, less than a year later after Afghanistan, we had Trump winning by 13 points with that same question in a 2024 rematch. So every single time we've asked over 2022 and 2021, Trump has beaten Biden by a comfortable to a massive margin. And it tightened up as we got closer to 2022, but Trump was still winning 6 points. Now, when push comes to shove in an actual election, a lot of people will turn out that didn't answer our poll, right? So we had Trump beating Biden 46 to 40, but there's 10% of people that say some other candidate that are just lying to you, right? They're going to vote for one of those two people. And then in this February, we had for the very first time Trump losing to Biden 45 to 42. And that was the swing. It's like, wow, all of a sudden Trump is losing to Biden. Why? Well, Trump probably had the worst string of 3 months in a row, November, December, January. He was baiting his supporters and dropping NFTs, and everybody was upset about the midterm turnout. And then he supports Kevin McCarthy. And our numbers showed that he did not. I mean, people at best in the Republican Party just don't care that much about Kevin McCarthy. And then this indictment happens, man. And Trump is right back up to 7 points. So 47 to 40 over Biden in our last numbers. So I think it was a blip. I think people are like, okay, Trump's back on track. And we'll see how it holds up. It's going to change over time.
But, for right now, I think a lot of and why this is so significant, as you said it, we every pollster has their own different philosophy. Your weights don't change all that frequently, so it's very apples to apples. So I think it's significant that we both found generally something here that I'm going to pop a couple of them up on the screen. I was going to get the trend while you were doing it, but income was huge to me. When I saw the income, and I'm going to put yours up here. Here, I'll show it. When I saw the difference in, the vote share for income, that less than 30 to me, which we had very similar numbers.
Is your audience a bunch of data nerds? Isn't this the most beautiful signal?
Absolutely, they are. They love this. Yeah. That's why you don't have to worry about, even though Laura always tells me, and here, I'll pop this up the screen while we're telling you, but even Laura always tells me, look, do a deep dive, but don't drown people in the process.
I will tell you when to resurface the two of you, okay? So
she just pops on to say that. Exactly. But they love this, and they get it. I mean, that's the thing I found about, the media, how you report polling, how we report polling versus how big media does it. They can take more than a top line mark. It's like they can, they are, the media considers people to be short attention spans. I mean, our audience simply is not. They get it, but they understood when I popped this up and said, look, less than 30,000 is the underclass. With all of the conversation about how Trump was the working class candidate, he really didn't do that good until you got to the 30 to 50, 30 to 100 even, but you found it too.
Yeah.
What's your take on this? I mean, this is a change for you as well, right?
Going back, I'm not sure how far this signal's been there. But the people that are voting for Trump, in my opinion, are definitely across the board who you would call the afflicted. Middle-aged people, people under the boot heel of COVID authoritarianism, lower educated workers, just across the board, your blue collar person that is struggling with inflation. And, they told us this coming into the 2022 election. All of the top issues that we had for voters were kitchen table stuff, gas prices, inflation, violent crime. So that's looking back at 2022, right? Red wave, all that kind of stuff is such a nuanced thing. The issues really should have played into Republicans' hands. And you say, all right, well, they didn't do as well. But then if you go back and actually look at the absolute bi-party turnout in midterm cycles, the Republicans have just been plugging away, like adding voters every turnout. And in actuality, it was really Democrats that underperformed by a massive amount. But it's just they came out pretty close, like closer than they could have otherwise. But I mean, they had that massive 60 couple million turnout, the Democrats in 2018. Did they even hit 50 this time? It was under 50.
Yeah, but it should have been a signal that it wasn't going to be 33% turnout anymore. Like 2010, 2014. I think you're right. You're 100% right there. I mean, Republicans got a little used to Democrats just not voting in midterms, and those days and I think, I don't want to get too much into it, but I think, with vote by mail, those days are over, so, I mean, it generally is, now going to be competitive, and Republicans got to get on the ball with that.
What I thought was fascinating too, is that in that same poll, and I could try and pull up a slide or whatever, but we compared Trump Biden versus DeSantis Biden.
I got two of them. Okay. You want to pop something up? Because this is where I was going to go with this. Let's look at Trump's best groups versus Biden's improvement, but then also we had this one, DeSantis's advantage over Trump. You want to start there?
Well, this is incredible too. And so this is like, you're like DeSantis, okay? He's the diet Trump or something, right? Maybe. But look at these demographics, and he's really far apart on some of these things. And so it's like their platform might ostensibly on paper look pretty similar, but their support is coming from different places. And what would help is how close to the Trump margin DeSantis was. We had DeSantis winning over Biden by 8, but Trump by 7. So really close. DeSantis had 46% of the vote. Trump had 47% of the vote. But look at this spread here. Trump does 3 points better by female among women in this, and 6 points worse than DeSantis among men, which I thought was crazy. But then all of DeSantis's support over Trump is coming from the most suspect of places.
Yes, please get into that, because we talked about this last week with our polling as well. Then, Mark, I'll put it back up in a second. But what I suspect, and what you mean, I suspect you mean by suspect, is that is not going to hold. That is not going to be the case a year from now or a year and a half from now. I mean, what's your
39-year-old voter telling somebody, oh, that DeSantis guy, I like the cut of his jib. When it comes to the 2024 election, that voter is voting probably for loan forgiveness or for the Hobbs decision or for something other than the fact that DeSantis is slightly different than Trump.
Oh, I'm muting myself. Also, looking at the more than 200,000, which was the only group we found where Biden was really doing well. That's 13 points better. You had a little
cocktail Republicans,
Cocktail Republicans, yeah. I mean, and what really jumped out, because we had this as well. We saw this as well. The somewhat disapproves which I went back and looked at our 2020 polling. Those somewhat disapproves who early on said they were going to vote Republican went back Democrat. They did. A lot of them, Republicans, did very well, which strongly disapprove, which if you look here, Trump does better. With Biden strongly disapproves. But at the end of the day, I mean, you would think Republicans were going to take, I don't want to spit a number out, but at least 60% of people who said they were somewhat disapproving of Biden, but that didn't happen at all. It didn't even come close. Where
I don't know
how
how
to
to
soften.
I'm still learning every day I run a poll. And those Biden somewhat approves to me are the most ephemeral things. They're like an electron cloud. They don't have any mass. It's like every time I see a signal and look at what they're saying, and it's like they're telling me they just don't want to be answering this poll. So I don't know why they bothered taking it in the first place.
Right.
It's like we ask a super politicized question and we get 25, 25, 25, 25 in the responses. So
that was the group, Mark, in our polling in 2022. That was the group because I know I saw yours. I saw others when we were getting these ridiculous leads for the Republicans on the generic congressional ballot. That was the group. That was the difference between the Republicans being, I mean, I'm not even kidding. I think our biggest lead for Republicans was 11 or 12, 13%, something ridiculous. But then ultimately our final was what? Republican plus 4 or 5, something like that. That came from mostly that group.
When was the latest you had Republicans up over 10, if you recall?
Never before. Until this election cycle, the answer to that is never. They have never had that big of a lead. Spring of 21, I believe they had a 13-point lead.
That's
or
what
the
we
summer. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that too. Okay. And then we had them double digits all the way until May, maybe. And then they were like 7 or 8. And then the Hobbs. Even it held up after the Hobbs decision.
It did for us too. Yeah.
It wasn't until September when it got into lower single digits for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and then right after Labor Day, there was like a Republican 2 plus 2.4, 2.5, but then got a little bit wider because they did a little bit better with educated voters, and which, by the way, they did. If you believe the exit polls, what the difference was in that point and a half was that the non-college vote was a smaller share of the vote than the likely voter model forecasted. Yeah. So it was, and that, you 5 points one way, and this from waiting, 5 points one way can do damage to a coalition, so that ultimately was the difference in our polling. I do want to show people the Trump.
Wait, what was your final call? I think we were the same, right?
Very close. 4 point something. If I remember, 4 point something.
We were at 5. So
I think it probably, let me look.
Yeah,
I'll look right now. It does, I think, round.
No, I think we had the exact same. So like ours through September and October, ours was like a sine wave. It went down and was in like 2 or 3 weeks at like 1 or 2, and then it went up and it was 2 or 3 weeks at like 7. I think the highest it got it was like 5 to 7. And so I really wonder how much of that was any actual dynamics and how much of it was just luck of the draw. Because if you average our numbers out, they're like off. So we just changed our weightings. We added a point back to Democrats, and it's based on the fact that we were 1 point to the right of 1.2 something to the right of the. So
yeah, well, that and I think too, there was a lot of voters in our polling, because we always try to look and we'll see what was the registration of this sample. There were more people who were Republican toward the end claiming they were independents. So I think we kind of overstated, how much participation Democrats would be of the overall electorate. But, but in the end, it did close to iron out because those independents weren't really independents. They're not.
Oh, yeah. Well, every day I take less and less stock in the party identifications either.
Me too.
In our polling, the signal has been in Biden approval, which is really standing in for Biden versus Trump, which is where probably all the political division is. There's a lot of places where the parties are closer than I really would have thought in this environment. Because you have young Republicans who don't know what that means and their parents are Republican, where you have all these people fleeing the Republican Party and calling themselves independents, but maybe they'll forget and call themselves a Republican again. And yeah.
It's very fluid, compared to whether someone changes their registration. I mean, we're in, I'm polling Utah, and this is separately, but I'm polling Utah right now, and I can see the sample of registrations is like 10 points higher than whether or not somebody identifies for Republicans. So I know they're registered Republicans, but maybe they're calling themselves independent. Democrats aren't benefiting, but independents are. And then there's this like massive sample of third party, which does really exist in Utah, but it's just, I think there's a dissatisfaction with their party. So, and by the way, that cuts both ways. There are some that think the party is, maybe 10% that think, or a little less, that think the party's too MAGA. So now I'm an independent. But for the most part, there's a lot of people who just think that the party is too soft. And they just don't want to consider themselves Republicans. Let me put this up. So the Trump improvement, so what you're saying here is compared to the last poll you had with Trump versus Biden, this is how much better Donald Trump was doing with these groups, right?
Yeah. For instance, you take women, 15-point swing. So back in February, Biden beat Trump by maybe 7 points among women. And now Trump's beating Biden by 8 points.
Yeah. We had
this. Look at liberals and Democrats. Now, liberals is a bit of a noisy, occult demographic, but the Democrat one, oh my word, 19-point swing in Democrats in 2 months. So now this one we could talk about, and it can give your viewers an idea of the stuff that we wrestle with on a daily basis. What this is telling me is that in the last 2 months, Donald Trump has done something that has said to national Democrat likely voters, oh man, maybe I should vote for this guy. Maybe Biden is, and it's like, what's happened since then? The only two big ones that I can think about are the Ohio trip and the indictment.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, the Ohio trip probably was a big one, right? Trump's getting out there and having, I hesitate to say positive news, but it was a good move and it made him look presidential. But how much of an impact could it really have been? So maybe, and this was taken like right after the indictment. So maybe it was the indictment. But the crazy thing is that we got this like multi-day bounce in Biden approval among Democrat voters. And he's up to we had an overnight result where he was like 86% approval among Democrats, like the day after the courtroom drama.
Back to the
it's like, what a paradox, right? Here the Democrats are saying, no, do not pursue your political, because a lot of Democrats said even about this Manhattan indictment that it was political vengeance. So there are definitely some unhappy Democrats. It definitely helped Trump here. But at the same time, it's totally boosted Biden's approval numbers. So go figure, right?
Yeah, I think the Democrat numbers stood out to me because, polling for the Epoch Times in 2020, the Public Polling Project, and then even when we were polling post 2020 with the rematches. I mean, Mark, we call it the hive mind. It was like nowhere near what it looked like in 2016, where Trump was bringing in some of these, like a certain percentage of Democrats that obviously other Republicans had a hard time doing. But now we're back to that now. And for all of the talk about how there are Republicans who just can't stand him, because we polled Haley too, another declared candidate. We didn't poll Vivek, but we did poll and we should.
Yeah, we did too. We haven't polled Vivek either. I keep asking to do that. But.
You did poll Haley, Nikki Haley, right? Yeah. And she just doesn't get anywhere near that with Democrats. And in fact, with Republicans had softer support. So, it doesn't jive with what you hear from the media, so which is what I really want to ask you. No matter who this nominee is, they have an incredibly difficult task, right? Even with Biden being, not popular, we had him in the 30s in the nomination, the 30s, which I went back and I looked, is there ever been an incumbent president who has been in the 30s in nomination polling? And I can't find one. Herbert Walker Bush had a problem. Carter had a problem. Right. Is there any comparable example of this?
Oh, no. I'd have to go dig in our numbers and try and find it. I'll tell you, he started with the lowest approval rating of any president we've been tracking. I can tell you that right now. He started like 6 points less than Trump did in job approval in his first month.
With that machine, that vote by mail machine, and with the hive, the combination of these two, would you agree that no matter who the Republican nominee is, it's going to be a very difficult task?
The Republican calculation of how they do this needs to change. They are playing a different game that the Democrats are absolutely playing. And I can point to, like, we can talk about a couple topics here and based on personal experience and numbers. One is, I really do not like polling in swing states right now because it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And we just went into Arizona and got some numbers that I'm very confident in that totally do not match the official reported certified election results. And I think you're putting this on YouTube, so I'll stop there, but people should go check it out. It's an open dig into the numbers, right? Although what's interesting is YouTube, those videos are still up where I actually talk about some of these stuff. So maybe we just haven't gotten the negative attention of the censors yet. But so there is that, right? Then there is the media, the overwhelming monopoly on mainstream normie media is very, very powerful. And so there were some election irregularities for certain in 2020. I think there are in every election to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
But we can always quibble about how much without having actual data. But that 2018 turnout was not all from election integrity issues, let's just say, right? There was a very real Donald Trump's a Russian agent vote. And it was the biggest turnout the Democrats ever had in an off cycle by 2 orders of like 2 sigmas, right? So there is that aspect. Well, as well, people do believe what they're told on the TV. Some people more than others. But there are people that absolutely trust Joe Biden, think he's doing a great job, and either don't mind the federal government being weaponized or are happy that it's happening. And so then there's also this other aspect of the Overton window, let's just say, shifting. And because that's what we do, is we track public opinion over time, right? It isn't just about going out and finding one data point. It's like, are people's brains changing? And people's brains have changed in the last 2 to 4 years a massive amount. And it's a very localized group of people, but they are people that they go out and vote. And
they vote.
It's the people that wanted to see unvaccinated folks locked up in camps. It's the people that are now 4 times more likely to support reparations than they were just 6 years ago. Even just some of the most innocuous topics. Like we talked about the confidence in the banking system, and Rasmussen, like Scott, was polling on that every month, like back in 2008, 2009. So he had all this wealth of data to compare to. And then in 2015, we stopped asking that question because everything seemed kind of to be okay, right? And then for the first time in like 8 years, we asked, how confident are you in the US banking system? And what was hilarious is that that data point was almost the same exact data point as it was 8 years ago. Independents, almost the same exact number. But Democrats were 3 times as likely to say they're very confident in the banking system. It's just like out of nowhere, this huge spike up. I put it in graphs. People could go look. It's incredible. And it's like, why? Well, it's probably because there's a Democrat in office. And the answer to that is no, because all 30 data points we had from before that were when Obama was in office, right? So there are weird things happening that's what we're trying to do, is ask the right questions to show people that the news is definitely disseminating narratives. The news used to report on public opinion. And
that's right.
And like they used to be sponsoring people like us to go out and poll because they wanted to tell people what America thought. Now they tell America what to think. Like it's totally different, right?
Totally. I mean, Mark, a great recent example is because you're seeing what you're seeing. You asked people whether they thought this was a political persecution, and yet CNN somehow comes up with this response where over 60% of people think this is the right thing to do or agree with it, however they word it. They're coming out with this, and at the same time, we're asking people, and I just don't know how they would come up with this result. There's not even a way I could weight it to make, to change the result to mimic their outcomes. I think you're right about something changing with that, and it is a certain group, but that group votes, and it's like no matter what we do, economic confidence. No matter what,
they're now apparently laundering hundreds of millions of dark money into NGOs to reinforce the voting pattern, right? Like,
yep. And they have this group of people, Mark, who see every issue through one lens. And it's different than it used to be. Ronald Reagan could go out and win 20-25% of the Democratic vote. It's just different. They are looking at the world through a certain prism. And no matter what the issue is or the reality of that issue, they're going to, come down on very predictably come down on one side. And they'll go out and they'll cast that ballot no matter what. We get this from our audience all the time. How could Biden's approval be at 44%? Like, with everything that's
44, we have it at 48 for 47. And it's like, guys, that's what the number is. Do you want me to lie to you? Like, sorry, that's what it is. There's reasons I can tell you why. 40, like we hit him as high as 50. And it's like, okay, like, let's take a breath. Trump was 48 to 51 or 2, like most of the back half of his term. And so Biden's polling lower. So that's a headline there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. That's a question I had on the table. But finish your thought.
So it's real people. Do I have to show you the raw data? You're coming to me because I don't lie. His approval is 47% right now. And it's because Democrats, 76% of them give him and we still have 15 to 20 to 22% of Republicans who give Biden positive marks too. And you could say, no, there's no way. But do you want, what phase of reality do you want to be in November of 2024? Do you want a complete picture of what you're up against? Or do you want me to just tell you, no, Biden's approval is 30%? And it's like, okay, there's a split Congress. He probably got a few points in his favor from there because he's been declawed a little bit. He's less of a threat. And he's on the back half of his term, and he's probably not going to run again. So he's like a little bit of a lame duck. So there's a reason right there where he's probably got a couple points in his advantage. But the other half of it is
the hive.
Well, now we say the hive. I had a fascinating discussion with one of our clients right before I got on here. And they do a lot of work polling the Hispanic population specifically. And because of that, we've done some work to try and wrap our heads around how to reflect that's tough. Like, there's a lot of dynamics there. But one of the angles that we've looked at is religion. And what we discovered is we always ask this question, like, tell me what your religion is. And we ran a pretty massive poll last year. They wrote a book about, and we added in a question, how often do you attend church services? And that was way more predictive than what your actual religion was, right? So it's about whether you have, in this case, like a right or a left stance. So what's funny is you could be an atheist, but if you go to your atheist services multiple times a week, you're probably going to vote red. And if you don't, then people obviously understand this, like watching you, but the point of why we ask questions isn't necessarily to get that headline, although it is, but it's to drive differences in demographics to understand why people think the way they do. And it used to be in the simpler days when the party would be where the demographic was. And we talked about, well, okay, Biden approval, because Trump and Biden are really more polarizing than your political party are right now, because that's where the most difference is. Biden strong approves versus Biden disapproves. But is that really the unified theory? Is that what's driving all the difference? And it isn't. There's something else. But what is that? And how do you pick the question to figure out what that one is? And that's the discussion I had. And part of it, I think, overlaps with the religion a little bit. It's almost like, is your religion, because
That's right. No, I know where you're going with this, man. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. So are you supplanting ideology with belief, like faith or something, and whatever faith that may be?
And where is your faith? And it isn't, and I'm not just saying it's like God or Biden. It's individual and community versus status authoritarianism.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right word is. I don't know how to ask that question, but I think that's where the polarization is coming from, because there are people that firmly trust and believe in the federal government, even on every topic, like even on vaccine safety. There are people with the blind. Oh, sorry. We won't talk about
that's good. That's all right though. But I know where you're going.
57% of Democrats think that federal agents provoked the Capitol riots, and that they're not against it, right?
But they had a good reason to do it, Mark. But they had what they think.
They're fighting in the Crusades.
Yeah, they're in the Crusades, right,
Yeah,
man?
right.
When we do voir dire trying to pick juries, or at least juror profiles that we think are better, we do call them authoritarians. I mean, there are different levels of them, and sometimes they can be combined with another personality type or belief system. But these are people who think, first of all, they're always going to believe the prosecutor's side of the story. It doesn't matter. A Casey Anthony one is a great example because
wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's certain prosecutors in certain districts that, you know what I mean? Like, stuff gets thrown out. Like,
that's true. In DC, that would be, I would say, that's an anomaly because they're being overwhelmed by some of the other ideological elements. But if it's
let me give you two quick. We asked after the Capitol riot, it's like, I forget the wording, but it was something along the lines of like, do you strongly agree that the perpetrator should be rounded up and incarcerated? And Democrats were like 80%, right? And then also, we asked about bail reform. We asked a set of questions, and we said, which is more reflective of your opinion, that not enough criminals are being arrested or that too many criminals are being sent to prison? And Democrats, a plurality, said that too many people are getting sent to prison right now. So It's like, it depends on why, right?
I'm way over commercial time, but I want to ask you this because this is new. You're doing it too. It's not just us, it's every pollster. So I showed people because you were likely voters. So when you're talking about Biden's approval, with us, registered voters is lower. Likely voters is slightly higher, his approval, which a lot of people questioned me about. Like, I thought likely voters would be more Republican. Well, that's not really the case anymore. But what we have is Biden doing so much worse than his approval rating. So how could you have, 40-something% approval rating, 44 to 47, all right, but yet against Trump be at 38%, 37%. This is new. I don't have a good answer. Not yet, anyway. I'm curious.
I have a good answer, but nobody's going to like it.
Go ahead. What's your take on this?
It's not a very good question. And this is us who
approval period. Yeah.
Right. And this is us who publish a daily presidential approval tracking number. It's not the world's best question to understand everything that's going on. Because there's a ton of reasons that people might not have a strong opinion and might just randomly pick an answer. So there's one, right? Two, well, I kind of like him personally. He's managing some, health issues, right? So they might feel sorry for him. Or it's like, oh, he's running the Democrats into the ground. I love the job he's doing, right? There's all these reasons why they might not answer that question very well or say something that doesn't match the election performance. And then from a likely voter to registered voter perspective, there's differences. And, there's differences in our data sources. There's tons of differences, right? Like, no pollster is ever going to get the exact same question, like the exact same results if we ask the same question. So it's like, how do we control for that and all try to predict the same election? Well, it's a challenge and we're all struggling with it, right? But with likely voters, I think what it probably does is swing more with the cycle. And the people right now who are answering it are just super opinionated. These are like politicos that just want to answer a political poll, even on Easter weekend, right? 2 years out from a presidential election. And I think that's probably why our numbers are higher. Now we have online panel, we have phone IVR, and people could say, all right, like the phone people are probably older and more conservative. But believe it or not, that's where my strongest leftist signal is coming from right now, because these people want to chew your ear off about how great Biden is. So, there's differences.
I think there's changes to that too. I think age-wise, the older people are getting more democratic. I just think that's happening.
They believe what they see on cable news.
They believe it, Mark. And when you were talking about cable news before, and you were saying the mainstream media has the monopoly, I was going to say, you know what? They're the age group where that has the most influence. And I think, when you were talking about the approve, disapprove question, I think generally our understanding of that has changed over time. And you see it. I see it all the time in the exports. If you look at individual responses in the CSV exports or whatever you're publishing out, when you're going to process the numbers, I see people all the time say, I somewhat approve. And then when I ask them about immigration, inflation, the economy, whatever, they disapprove. And it's like, well, how could you have said you somewhat approve? Because his approval is always higher than the individual issues. And under Trump, it was, I disapprove. But then when we asked about issues, it was higher. So he'd be like at 55 on the economy, but 42 or 45 on his overall approval. The question itself sucks now. It sucks. It's us, though. It's us, Mark. I really think
the question. It's the PSYOP playbook is so overwhelming. We're in the business of public opinion and narratives, and we're trying to get our narratives out there. And the reason is because they're the correct ones. They're what public opinion is and what people think, right? But like you just look at a random swing, like look at Nevada. I go into Nevada for November 2022, and I forget what we had. It wasn't too crazy off. I think we were pretty close there. But we had Trump up, I don't know, like 10 points over Biden in a hypothetical 2024 rematch, something like that, right? But then if you ask a question about like border walls and E-Verify, they win by 40 points, not 10. So now, and they're like Arizona, it's on the border, and that's the case. They want border walls and E-Verify and things like that by like 10 or 20, 30, 40 point margins, but then they only vote by 10 points for Trump, right? Well, we won't get into that, right? But so it's why, right? Well, they have other issues, or they have been focused on emotional things, or they don't trust the human individual that represents a platform. And that's all narratives. And it's like when you have the dollar dying and foreign wars and the collapse of like our social institutions and things along those lines, right? Like, man, illegal immigration was a huge one just back in 2015 or 2016. It was the meat of the platform. I don't even think it would make our top 5 issues right now if I ran it. Only among Republicans, it probably still would. And it's gotten worse. It's gotten far, far worse, the actual levels of illegal immigration. So that's the craziness. Like the
narrative has changed. The news cycle has changed. Trump isn't he's running now, but he's not the voice everyone hears, when they're looking at election news, and, not anymore, not like it was in 2015 or even 16. So, the politicians drive some of this and then the media has to cover it. Now they don't let Trump, they kind of like run a blackout on his message, so it will be harder for him to drive that. I don't know. I got to take a commercial break. I know I kept you for a long time here, though. I'm
having fun.
Yeah. Can you hang until the commercial's over? I got a couple questions people wanted me to ask you, and I didn't.
Sure.
All right, cool. Let me just run through some reads, and give me maybe 5 minute stops. All right.
Great.
All right, folks. This is a dynamite conversation. It is. All right. So let's really quick run through this, and we'll get back to it. All right. All right. So first of all, the national security experts are warning that our aging power grid is more vulnerable than ever. January marked the 3rd time a power station in North Carolina was damaged by gunfire. Authorities are saying the attack raises a new level of threat. Authorities are now checking our power grid for these vulnerabilities. But what if they identified 9 key substations, if they were all attacked and power was knocked out from coast to coast for up to 18 months? Could you imagine that? Your life would not be disrupted for days, but weeks or months. It would be frozen in time at the moment the power fails. Lights all over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. And that's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install in your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, hell, even your fridge. And right now you can go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP10 to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4Patriots, use the promo code TPP10, and get 10% off. One more time, 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP10 to get yours off today. I did get several of your pictures that showed me that you got the Patriot Power Generator. That's awesome. Good for you. You're prepping for your family. Here's my tip again of the day, which I always give you guys. The 3-month survival kit is the bomb. It's one of the, if not the best deal on the website. You will get things along with it. So you keep that promo code, use it for like a bigger purchase like that, and see what you get along with it before you use the promo code for stuff like the water purifier, like I have behind me. All right. So just to give you guys a little bit of a tip so you don't wind up, I'm trying to give you the best savings that you possibly can. That's it in a nutshell. Okay. One more time, 4patriots.com, promo code TPP10. And as always, send me your feedback. We love to hear it. All right. We're all about health over here at People's Pundit. You know that. All out of the things we tried before, we brought to doctors. We said, hey, how we doing on it? Is it working? Junk science is what we always get thrown in our face. That's what the doctors called all these fruit and vegetable supplements that we've brought to them. Junk science because they use extracts of common produce department fruits and vegetables that really have few health benefits. And I take Field of Greens because it's the whole organic fruit and vegetable, not a watered down supplement. And it's backed by a better health promise. Each ingredient in Field of Greens was scientifically chosen to support vital organs like heart, lungs, and kidney health. Others support my immune system, blood pressure, metabolism, and healthy weight loss. I don't eat as healthy as I should. Who does? But that's why I take Field of Greens. And like me, you'll probably look and feel healthier fast and have way more energy. But your best proof will really be at your next checkup when your doctor says, whatever you're doing, it's working, keep it up. Let's get started today with 15% off. Go to fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP for the People's Pundit. That's promo code TPP at fieldofgreens.com. And again, send me which flavors do you like the most? I'm curious. All right. I am a lemon lime guy. Laura's a berry. All right. Give us your feedback. We love hearing it, as we do from here as well. I told you this popcorn was the bomb. I told you the coffee was great as well. And for, I don't know how long it's going to last, a limited time. If you go to Jam and Bean, when you sign up for a new subscription, a brand new subscription, use the promo code TPP40 at checkout, 40, and you'll get 40% off your subscription, that first subscription price, and then 10% off every subsequent subscription. You'll still get the 10% from People's Pundit discount, but if you use TPP40 for a new subscription, they will give you 40. They will knock 40% off that initial cost and still give you the 10% off. I didn't get a chance to eat the new popcorn flavors I got online. Maybe I'll do that while Mark's answering some of my questions, but send us all the feedback of what flavors you like the most. Apple pie is a new one, inspired by Laura. They're amazing. They're all amazing. And of course, organic, natural flavoring, and you will absolutely love it. All right. Like I always tell people. All right. Tell you what, Mark, that popcorn is off the chart good. And it's not, like gourmet popcorn is really expensive. This is not expensive at all. As a matter of fact, while I ask some of the, I'm going to eat the white cheddar before Laura stops me. Nice. While I ask some of the questions to you, look, this is a point I was trying to get to before, which is that we got Trump up, you got Trump up. What's realistically, and you said you hate going into the battleground states now, what's realistically, in your mind, the best path for Trump against Biden in 2024 as far as battleground states? So a lot of people on the Republican side are wigging out about Wisconsin, and I did a show on Wednesday morning showing different maps about since 1984, when Reagan became the last one until Trump to carry it. It's really generally it's so similar, the counties between Trump and Reagan, but Republicans just don't seem to be able to perform at that level in a state like Wisconsin. So then there's issues with Georgia. There's issues with Arizona. You polled it again, and I know we're on YouTube. We got to be careful. But what do you think the path is here to 270 for Trump?
I'm going to answer this question in a way more meta way than your viewer with the question probably wants to hear. I'm an independent public opinion professional. The key word there is independent, okay? I do this because I hate lying. I love the truth, and people lie all the time, and I know the truth, and I'm trying to tell them the truth, okay? I'm not a political strategist, and let me tell you this, even personally, I've never, ever donated a single dollar to a political party. And I am worried about the future for my kids, and I have the same kind of issues a lot of us have like nowadays, right? But what is most important to me is to ask questions and try to get to the truth of what's going on. And it's tough because people like lie to us all the time. I just got results back while you were reading an ad read. And it's like I got over 30% of U.S. likely voters saying that it's at least somewhat likely they're going to vote third party in the upcoming presidential election. Guess what? They're lying to me, right? So now, I'm not a political strategist. I'm not going to sit here now and look ahead a year and a half and try and add up electoral votes for the Trump campaign. He's just another candidate to me, right? And I want to understand the dynamics of why his supporters like him, and and use like things like our electoral system and past elections to understand as a framework what my numbers what the ramifications might be. But when I ask a 2024 Biden versus Trump rematch right now, it's not about the 2024 election. It's about what's happening right now, because opinions are absolutely 100% going to change. So now here's how I can tell you about that. Looking back at what's happened in the past is that Trump in 2020 turned out the most Republicans of any candidate ever, and of any Republican candidate ever. Massive turnout, huge increase in turnout, right? But here's the problem. Biden turned out way more Democrats, even more than Trump turned out Republicans. And we can get into a host of reasons of why that is. And some people might say the bad F word, right?
Right.
This YouTube. But
let's keep it the F word.
There's less of that than you think. There's more of the authoritarian, I don't know what to call it, right? But the fact is that the Democrats and Republicans are, in my opinion, playing two very different games.
Yeah.
And that the Democrats have changed the game and the Republicans have not. And we can get into what that means. And I can tell you things that I've asked questions about in the past, like the fact that everybody wants to see Mitch McConnell gone in the Republican Party, and yet he's still there. And less than half of Republicans wanted to see Kevin McCarthy there, and yet he's still there. And Ronna McDaniel was our number 3 candidate. She was beaten by Harmeet Dillon and Mike Lindell.
And Lindell. We did too. Yep.
And she's still there. Now, would those people be more effective? I don't know. But I can tell you that if it looks like Republicans are going to get Trump as a candidate. I don't know what's going to happen in 2020. Something different has to happen, I think. And I don't think you can say, well, Trump is obviously going to win this time because Biden destroyed America. It's like that might be a good story to tell yourself, and maybe you're right, but I don't have high confidence that a massive amount of the Democrat electorate sees it that way.
Yeah, this gets, and you just brought up the Mitch McConnell thing. This goes to one of the other questions, but I just want to wrap what you were saying right there, which is they are playing two totally different games. And I can tell you there's no interest at this point because the same people are there, Mark. There's no interest in them changing that game. And when people like you and I look back on the polling from 2022, and we've had these discussions between the two of us before, the ingredients were there for a Republican landslide. They didn't put it into into motion. You know, they were playing a different game, and it's not a game only of persuasion anymore. And they're not recognizing what you just brought up. Well, I have no better way to put it.
Here's the right way to put 2022. Republicans did great. They had a massive increase in Republican voter turnout. But guess what? The Democrats turned out exactly who they needed, where
they needed. Yeah,
that's what happened.
Exactly.
So, two different games. And it's like, okay, they needed to turn out 81 million people in 2020, right? Maybe they were just being safe. I don't know, right? I don't know. I have no idea what's going on in the dark room where they figure out how that. But look around you. Have you gone to CPAC before?
I have. I didn't go, but the last one I went to was in the one in Dallas. But you've been to one. I try to go to these newer ones to see if anything changes.
I went to my first one in DC, and like I looked around. It's it's like, okay, it's a business event for me, right? And I looked around and I tried to form an opinion about what's happening in the conservative movement right now. And it's like, okay, some people are doing stuff. And it's like, now look at Project Veritas's Twitter feed right now.
Yeah.
And what's happening on the side that's going to support Democrats? Well, they've been laundering money for 2 years. So it's like, while we have these nice new PACs forming, that's great. That are going to vet people and that's great. But they've been laundering hundreds of millions of dollars into dark money pools that are going to pay for. So
that's right. They're going to pay to get people out. I mean, Mark, this is the example I use a lot because it's one of the more, first of all, it was one of the more effective ones, but it's not by far, it's not alone. In 2022, a Democratic PAC and, easily went to mega donors because progressive mega donors see the value in doing stuff like this. And they started a PAC that essentially paid people like they were employees to go out and get ballots in their local neighborhoods to get people to vote. And these weren't partisan people, Mark. They were people who had a hard time putting food on the table. Yeah. Some of them would make up to $500 a week to do this. This one girl actually answered the question in one of the videos teaching them how to do it, because they train them. She was like, can I make more money if I get Republican ballots too? Like, she had no idea this was like a Democratic operation. She just wanted money.
That's what's so insidious about it. Once you rate transparency, Americans love transparency. In fact, I remember some pretty prominent political figures talking about being transparent, right? But they don't get transparency. And it's like the whole point of the Federal Election Commission is so it's like we know who's funding these people. The second you throw massive money laundering into it, the money might as well be coming from our foreign adversaries. It might as well. Doesn't matter who it's coming from anymore. Just assume the worst, and you're probably correct. And so now, are the people that are taking that money are the people that working in all these campaigns around the nation? Is it like ideologically anti-American? It's no. And like I worked in a big corporate recently, and people talk about woke corporations, and I can tell you that this is not some massive nefarious Illuminati thing. This is just people being self-interested and wanting to get ahead and not having that much integrity anymore. And once you get very few people, like look at what happened with this DA thing, like with supporting a few like district attorneys in elections, how much leverage can be applied, right? So I don't know. I've thought a lot about this, right? I have 4 children that I need to raise in modern day America. And it's in some ways it's overwhelming, but in other ways you're like, well, it's like this, it's not this like, I don't know. There's like overwhelming control and application of leverage structures. Like it's not just the news, right? It's colleges and corporate boardrooms and in many aspects, much of DC, where there's just this utter supremacy of alignment of interests. And
we call it cartelized systems. I mean, that's really what they are, and they're very effective at once they log roll together to these common goals. They're very effective where everybody stays in their lane and does what they have to do.
It's not Republican Democrat.
That's
self-perpetuating. That's all.
Yep. Let me before we get too far away.
And
from
that was deep. That was deep.
It is though, but it's true though, and that's the thing. Like, I can't get that woman out of my mind. She was like, because they're giving her Democratic lists, but she didn't care about that, Mark. She just wanted the money, and she's like, if I know neighbors who are Republicans, if I get their ballot too, do I still get the money? You know, like that's all she cared about, and they harnessed. It's amazing to me because they made the inflation problem, and then here's a single mother that they're now putting themselves forward being the solution to, you know, and they're great. It's a great story. But when they have all of these levers, exercising all these levers and having all this institutional, all these institutional advantages, then, that's what's going to drive an outcome, not the story, you know? So let me ask you this. This is something we deal with a lot. Do you think, I know the audience knows how I feel about this, but you said it before. Everybody wanted Mitch McConnell gone. Sometimes we seriously have Democrats giving us a higher percentage of Democrats who have a favorable image of Mitch McConnell than we do Republicans. That happens to us. It's great. You got that too?
We had him in the mid to high 20s of at least somewhat approving among Republicans and less Democrats. But he has a higher, very favorable rating. It was like 8 points to 6 points or something.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly where. Yeah.
But we wanted him going like 62 to 21 or something like that.
I'll look while you're answering this. I didn't even add together, or I mean, it's there for people to look at, but we didn't really even discuss what the latest was for him. But it was abysmal. I know it was. Yeah. And McCarthy's got better actually, but
he had a massive improvement. Oh, I forget. So, to give everybody a gauge, our latest Trump favorability numbers among Republicans were 77 or 78, but he went way up with very favorable. He's almost at 60% very favorable among Republicans. I think McCarthy's up to like 70 now.
Wow. Yeah, and he's getting some of the voters who are, MAGA, and he's getting some of the more institutionalized voters who maybe didn't know where he stood. We definitely saw an increase, but overall,
and he's on the news more, right?
He's on the news more. Yes. I have no opinion numbers shrunk like 10 points for us, so people are getting to know who McCarthy is more. But do you think that overall Republicans have and this is a question one of the members on YouTube said, if they're taking questions, can you ask Mark if he sees a fundamental image problem just generically for Republicans? And I tend to think leadership has a lot to do with this, but what do you think? Do they have an image problem? Because Democrats like their party. Democrats like their party.
Yes. And I would want to pull up the poll to answer that. And so I'm not going to, but we did run this, I think 2 or 3 months ago. I think it was after the speaker debacle, but the general gist was the Republicans had less faith. Republicans had much less faith in their own party to get their candidates elected than Democrats did, essentially, by a pretty significant margin. But the numbers, the way the questions were asked, the numbers, too much to go into right now. So look it up.
Yeah, it's that's what I'm trying to do is look up some of what we have. So I had the likely voter up, which I didn't put in. I had the registered voter before, but if I look, what jumps out at me immediately is that, especially favorabilities with leaders, Republicans don't like their leaders as much as Democrats do. Like all the time that we had Nancy Pelosi so underwater, it was because Republicans and independents didn't like her, but Democrats still liked her. They still circled the wagons around her, and we don't.
Yeah. Like I had her in the fall on her way out the door. I think she finally had some cracks appear. I think I had her among Democrats less than Trump among Republicans, but not by much. And Chuck Schumer, I think, polled about where Kevin McCarthy did, which was mid to high 50s. So,
yeah, mid to high 50s. Yeah, Schumer's always been. Go ahead.
Keith Jeffries came in and everybody's like, cool, new guy, love him. Like, you know what I mean? It's like totally different.
We had a pretty high I don't know who Hakeem Jeffries is. I suspect if we would put the party next, because we just say we'd like to ask you your opinion on congressional leaders, but we don't tell them who's who. We just say Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, so because I feel like if we would say like Gallup says Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy, that's what they put, which is why I think they got a higher favorability than we did, because I don't know if you that would do it anyway. Maybe we should, consider it, but that's basically what we're looking at.
We're going to care. I'll tell you, Democrats will care a lot less about who the human being is that you're asking about, for sure.
Without a doubt.
I would have to go.
That D, man. They see that label, and that's all that matters to them, Yeah. You just were saying, too, about your third party, which a lot of people were questioning. We're getting a massive third party, too, and it doesn't matter who the candidates against Biden are. Yeah, it grew with Nikki Haley, for instance. Some ridiculous number said they would vote third party if it was Nikki Haley. But for the most part, there is a 2016-like dynamic for us where there's, in 2020, it was a very small third party vote. This time, it's a big one. What do you think is driving that? I mean, of course, there's lying going on, but you think there's just dissatisfaction?
Well, we haven't written a story on these numbers yet, but let me kind of peek at the party signal.
Exclusive.
It's coming 6 points more from Democrat than from Republicans. Republicans, it's clearly like probably just a protest answer. It's like, man, it's like maybe the never Trumpers, but at the end of the day, like Romney wasn't that long ago, right? So, and then on the Democrat side, I feel like very few Democrats want Biden to run again. I think it's like 30, I don't know, it's less than half. So he appears to want to run for president again. So that could be where some of your third-party votes coming from. And I don't think it's unreasonable to suspect that about 30% of Democrats are unhappy enough with their party's platform. They'll probably still vote Democrat. But I don't know if this is just one of those things, though, where everybody always overestimates their independence, right? And then these people will all just go away. Because like every single time I ask the Trump-Biden question, right, we're getting 11%, some other candidate. But you know as well as I do, as soon as September hits, like that 10 points is going to be 8 points, then 6 points, then 4 points, and then 0. Like,
yep.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is there's a big, in 2016, I go back and I look, and it was like until the 4th of July, there was a huge third party vote. It turned out to be historically quite a bit for Johnson and for Stein. But at the end of the day, they were bobbing between 38 and like 44% each, Hillary and Trump. But we never did the head to head. We always did with the third parties. Yeah. And it did dissipate over time, but that held. In 2020, it wasn't as prominent.
Where do you think those people went to?
Where do I think they went to?
Yeah.
I think some of them, Hillary jumped at the end in the last couple of days. We basically said to people, you cannot tell us undecided anymore. If you're going to vote third party, you have to, at this point now you have to declare, because it was like a tracking panel. Yeah. And I think some of them didn't vote. And I think a lot that some of them, I actually think that third party helped Trump in 2016. In 2020, I think it hurt him, and Biden won those.
I bet you he brought all kinds of disaffected Republicans back into the electorate for sure. Man, what a wacky cycle that was, though. Because now I'm thinking back, right? There was like the email gate, then there was the Comey announcement, there was the Podesta emails, there was the Access Hollywood tape. Like,
yeah, we look back to that actually, and the Access Hollywood tape. He got hit, but it wasn't. You know what happened? Republican and independent women just went to I don't know that with the Access Hollywood tape. Yeah. And then maybe like a week, not even a week later, he popped back up. So it was just a response bias. It didn't shock in our poll anyway. It didn't shock anybody. And I remember going back and listening to George Stephanopoulos say, oh, this tape killed him. He's 13 points down now. And I'm thinking to myself, we moved 2 points. We moved 2%. What are you talking about? But I think people just kind of knew who Trump was, and they didn't care, you know. And there were some women who didn't want to admit that it didn't bother them, and then they came back because at the end of the day, they're going to vote, right? I mean, these people have vote histories. But yeah, let's see one more from you, and we'll see. I'll let you go because I kept you forever, but. Have you ever asked anybody about, and I got to be careful with YouTube here. You guys are killing me, Red Diver. All right. I got to be careful. It is on YouTube. So have you ever asked about, let me put it this way. This last survey, we asked about whether or not, or how likely people thought it was that the government, mainly the Central Intelligence Agency, had a hand in JFK. All right. So we went to a third rail here. And what the person's kind of asking, I don't know if you've ever asked anything like that, but do you think that they would actually benefit? Would the administration benefit, or any presidential candidate benefit by promising to disclose some of these secrets? Or Nord Stream is another one. You know, would the next presidential administration benefit from admitting, you know, maybe we did that Nord Stream? Like, does that matter?
Campaign on transparency? Every single politician on earth has done that, right?
That's essentially what he's asking. But like, on these like deep secret kind of issues, you know, would that benefit them? Is there any political capital there anymore?
I don't know how to answer that. So we try and pick stories to run where we think that the results are newsworthy, let's just say. So we'll look for topics in the news and say, all right, here's a topic that people care about. Is American public opinion the same, or would it be interestingly different? And that's how it drives most of the decisions of what we choose to run on. So for instance, the vaccine questions, we said, wow, there's questions that haven't been answered and people are still super concerned. So it would be very interesting to find if the numbers happen to be different than what people think. And we did, and it was newsworthy and people ran with the story. Okay. Now, the Nord Stream pipeline would absolutely 100% fit into that. 4 weeks ago, people really cared, and we didn't ask on it. And it's not because we didn't care. It's because we asked another question and the timing didn't work. And now people don't seem to care. We did like East Palestine. That's similar, right? It's like people getting poisoned potentially by a spill that the EPA tried to, you know, and we asked very candid questions about that. I think we came out with some really newsworthy results, which was basically nobody believed the EPA that the water in East Palestine is safe to drink. And we put it out there and, you know, like it had some legs. JFK, I mean, it's not in the news. And you know what? I bet you if I asked the question, a large majority of Americans would say, yeah, okay, it's reasonable to believe that the CIA did this. Because look at what the FBI rated Trump and the undercover agents provoked the Capitol riot. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's not in the headlines. And it's interesting to know, but there's other important questions to ask. And like,
it's hard to fit it all in, man. At the time things are happening, it's really hard. We try to ask the UFO question once a year, and we got lucky this time. Where it was like in the
what'd
news.
You find? Tell me.
We basically found. Let me pull up the last.
We've done some UFO stuff a while back, but I don't think we've done it recently.
I
think we might have asked about the Canada question. I mean, that's a good thing to ask. It's like, okay, you got
we got lucky
and Romney.
That's in the news, man. We got so lucky. Twice because the report on ATIP, you know, the follow up came out last year. And when we were asking the question, it's usually around the spring. And then with this one, if you remember, the Biden administration was seriously trying to claim they shot down UFOs because of the, you know, basically, I thought it was a very clear attempt to get people's attentions away from the balloon and everything else that was happening, the Chinese spy balloon and stuff like that. So, but what we found,
poor 4-year-old cry because his Paw Patrol balloon got nuked.
you know. Well, here's 2022. Where's 23?
We've asked UFO questions, but never. I don't think in the
okay. Here it is.
Framing of an election.
So this year, last year we had. I updated a thread from 2022. So in 2022, we found some significant bump, which was that where are you? 42%, 42.6% this year, meaning 2022, of voters believe that at least some of the sightings can be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence visiting Earth, which is up from 38% the prior. And then last year, in 21, 58.6% said they believe that intelligent life forms exist elsewhere in the universe. Now it's
we have that question.
Now it's 62%.
62.
Yeah,
this is probably the Joe Rogan effect, is what I'm guessing.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. And we used to have only Mark. It was like a ridiculously low 10% or something. Thought that
you said 62.
62. Yep.
On
extraterrestrial life in the rest of the universe.
On June 7th, 2021, 63%.
Whoa, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's
likely, 38% very likely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then also we asked like
wait, your viewers have to know. Like, I have no idea what your full methodology is. I'm pretty sure that we're like completely different, right?
We are, and that's what's so interesting about some of this, and that's why with the presidential race is the same. We do have very different methodologies. They're not, I mean, we weight differently. We don't wait for party. That's why party is always different in our polling, or at least theoretically it should be. And typically it's pretty close regardless. Like maybe one month it's D+2, the next month it's R+1. I mean, very close, but trends over time can change. Like after Biden took the White House, it went to like D+7.
Would your UFO numbers have been registered voters, or would they have been like weighted to the census?
They've registered voters.
Yeah.
Registered voters. Yep.
So this is our census model. So like all adults. So yeah.
What we found
relatively that's pretty cool. That totally, I'm using different data sources.
Right. And it comes so close. In 2018, we asked about, have you personally seen a UFO? And that it's amazing. It's like under the Trump administration, people's views about UFOs became more mainstream.
What was that number?
Let me go back. The latest one in 28 here. Let me go to Big Data Poll.
Have you or anyone you've ever known?
That's what we ask. It's exactly how we do it. Yeah.
19%.
That's great. And now it's about 21% or 19 or 20%, something like that. Let me look it up. But before, in years ago, it was low, like 12%, very, very low.
But do you know what 28% of people say?
What?
That they know somebody that died from the COVID vaccine.
That was I'm glad you asked that. And I'm also glad that you guys got on the adverse effects stuff.
So more people, I'm just saying, like, then have seen a UFO, just so people can benchmark.
Yeah, so let's see what it says. Where are we? That's about 20% now. But back in April 2018, only 12% said they have personally witnessed or know somebody who has, seen a UFO. And it was in 2021, it hit 18%. And that was the first time it ever rose like that. It had been like 10, 12%. And then it got to 18. And then every year in 2022, it took a little bit higher.
Hold on. I got 2018 numbers too.
What do you got in 2018? Is it close to like 12?
13.
No way!
Yeah.
No way! That's great. So I think that maybe ATIP had a big impact in that, but that's some stuff that Gallup used to ask that, they abandoned that. So it's you and us now.
So people got to understand that from our perspective, the challenge of a question like that, right?
Yes.
So it's like, okay, this is the 2018. I think was the first time Rasmussen reports ever asked this question. And probably there was something in the news that spurred us to do it. And it was like, okay, we're putting this question into the field. What's going to come back? You have no idea.
No.
It could be like the worst possible result is that you get a number like 4.5, because you're like, oh man, it's like outside the margin of error. So it's statistically significant. So it's a real number. It probably extrapolates to like millions of human beings. But at the end of the day, too, it's like you got to understand that these people that are taking the poll are like rushed. Some of them can barely read. Like, it's just like there is some noise in polls. It's not a perfect art.
Oh, for sure.
And so it's like, now I'm going to run a headline that's like 4% of Americans think they've seen UFOs, where it's like, maybe it's noise. And now everybody's going to be like, oh, look, there's Rasmussen reports polling on like UFOs. They're tinfoil conspiracies. You can't believe anything they say. So it's like, at the end of the day, all we are doing is just asking questions, but you're putting your reputation on the line every time you go into the field. And so that's why I think that there aren't people asking about the vaccine stuff. It's because they're afraid that they're going to get a response that's like, it's like, if it's 0, it's a headline. If it's 30%, it's a headline. If it's like 5, it's, what do you like, especially a question like this, where like almost everybody's going to say no, but you're trying to measure the few people that say yes, it's a tough one. So the fact that this, and so everybody knows, that's why when you ask the question, you say, or anybody you've known, it magnifies the response, and you're getting, it's like a better signal. And it's like, okay, you can't then extrapolate it into a number, but that's not what public opinion's for. That's what scientific journals and publications are for. And that's right. The kind of flack that we got about our vaccine polling. It's like, well, anybody you know personally, that could be, how do you know how many people died from the vaccine? I'm not trying to tell you how many people died from the vaccine. I'm just telling you people are afraid of it because they think it's happening. So now science step into the breach. And of course they're not going to. So
as far as those kind of questions impacting impacting your reputation, when we started to do this with the UFO polling, nobody was really paying attention. And then I think when in 2021, I believe it was the first one, somebody started
a video or whatever. On Tucker.
We got all the ancient alien people sharing it on Twitter. You know, the guys are on the History. It was pretty cool. The guys from like the History Channel, Ancient Alien Show.
Oh, your numbers.
Yeah, and it was pretty neat. Yeah. But then, of course, you have those people who are like, dude, those crazy people are that's who reads big data, Paul. And I'm like, you people are pathetic. But on the vaccine,
there's so many questions that are like legitimate to ask.
Of course, it's legitimate. It's an security issue.
It's like Building 7. But it's risk reward at the end of the day. It's like, it's like people sitting on the other side of the fence and like don't know us as human beings. I just want to tell the truth in the best way. I'm trying to do right by the Rasmussen Reports brand. I want to get the truth out there about stuff, but it's like that doesn't pass the risk reward like equation right now. Maybe if somebody uncovers something that will spur us and give us some cover, but
adverse effects, stuff like that. That is, because I remember we had the vaccine tracker. What was your status? And every month we were asking people, did you get the 2-shot first round? And then we were looking at the percentage of people who did, and we were comparing
1-shot vaccination rate.
We were in the, let me look. Let me go to Everviz, which I had. And then, by the way, we did also ask about boosters. When the boosters came out, we stopped after the second round of boosters because it was like people were it was falling off, Mark, like crazy. I mean, people were not getting a second round. So it was pointless to even ask. And what we were also doing while I'm signing in to look at it, we were seeing whether or not the administration's campaign, the steps they were doing to convince people to take the vaccine were really wise, right? So when you're looking at the demographics of people who were not taking the vaccine, to run these, ads during Deadliest Catch and NASCAR, it's like you were targeting a certain group of people that you thought were hesitant, not what the data was showing us, who were hesitant. Like the groups that were hesitant were not anywhere near what they were targeting. We had already been vaccinated before the first booster came out. 69 or no, I'm sorry, 65% before the first booster came out, and then it rose to 69.4 the last time a booster came out. And that's pretty.
So we were, you and I were within a few points. I think that we got maybe up to 72, and then it petered off as people were like, "Nah, I don't want to be part of this club."
Yeah,
but it's like, what did this CDC or the WHO say? It was like 90. Like, no,
it's not. Do not intend to get vaccinated. Never fell below 20%. Do not intend to get vaccinated. The lowest it was 20.1%. It ranged from a low of 20% to a high of 26. And they never got any better than 22.6% when we stopped. So
if you like your gut on the party breakdown of that, 15 and 35 or something like that.
It was age was the big thing, something like that, 15 to 35. If you're talking about the low, that's probably pretty close, but it was age. We had highly educated people telling us they weren't going to take it. And urban minorities were like, no. We literally had somebody, my wife who is Hispanic was like, look, let me just tell you how brown people are going to view this. And she was 100% correct. We were literally hearing people on the other end going, listen, Whitey, you take it, and then I'll take it. You're not going to experiment on me. No, thank you. She was 100% correct. And meanwhile, they're blaming Southern evangelical Christians. I mean, it's nuts. That was not the wise way to use taxpayer dollars. It just wasn't.
Interesting. I'm trying to think back because I almost think in some aspects, I'm trying to think of the question that I would have disagreed on the race question because there was a strong signal of COVID fear in Black Americans.
Well, we broke it down by region too. Like, so if you were a suburban Black voter, you got vaccinated, or a Black American, you got vaccinated. If you were in the urban areas, you were more skeptical, which to me was crazy.
What are your sample size on these? Like when you
this one is about there are at least 2,000.
Yeah. So people know of our differences. We're kind of like high. I'm not trying to like put us down, but we pull high volume. Like we're going into the field pretty much every day and we're making smaller samples. So it's like 1,000 person poll, which it's like, I'd love a 2,000 person poll, but we want to put out more stories and just poll more often. And it's like, if I'm trying to predict elections, I want to poll a lot. And so I'd try and do bigger polls and stuff like that. But the way to perceive like something like that is like, okay, our vaccination rate came pretty close to yours, but it was 1,000 person poll instead of 2,000. Yours is more accurate and probably the right answer. And, ours fluctuated around there. But the way it should be perceived is like if a headline comes out from Rasmussen reports, it's like, oh man, maybe the vaccine is equally as deadly as the COVID virus. Then instead of saying, well, it's only 1,000 person poll, what you should be saying is, where the hell's Gallup? Like, right?
Yeah.
That's what you should be saying. Is
I
like,
can't believe Gallup didn't do anything.
Or it should be like, oh, I want to. That's horrifying. Let's go pay Rasmussen for a bigger sample. Like that's the way you should be thinking about it. Not to like totally acknowledge the poll because you don't think that it's met some 1,000 persons. Totally valid to report a headline that somebody else should dig into, i.e. independent journalists who are not doing their job on certain topics, right?
I can't believe Gallup didn't. I was really disappointed in that. But they've been afraid since 2012. I had people come up to me and
I don't want to bring their name into it because we just got a nasty gram from
Did you really? I'll tell you, I got an email from somebody after we did the adverse effect, because what we did, we had the vaccine tracker, are you vaccinated? Do you intend to get vaccinated was part of it. And then I do not intend. What we did is add later whether or not people felt like they experienced, and we did it the way the CDC did it. So this is what drove me nuts about some of the critics. We didn't give specific adverse effects. We said this is their definition of a mild adverse effect. This is their definition of a moderate adverse effect. This is their definition of a severe. And severe was prevented me from daily activity. Moderate was hindered my daily activity, and mild was I felt it, but it didn't hinder my daily activity. And we found the relationship over months of 6 months. We had this very consistent relationship to age, which is if you were younger, you experienced more severe adverse effects. That turned out to be what all the scientific studies were showing, yet we took a beating over it. And we also got an email from
I
some.
don't know where you guys were asking questions about that, and that's on me. What severe rate did you come out with?
Not huge, but it was a high of about 6%, a low of 4%. It was so consistent. And people would say, oh, it's only 6%, but it was a huge sample. So it was plus or minus 2.1, right? And
I know you're going through and like weeding out the ones who it's like, this human being is clearly not reading questions, right?
Yeah. We have some, good, data filters, right?
Yep.
And I mean, honestly, Mark, I mean, if it's that consistent over 6 months, you can't dismiss it. And people were like,
I'm not, and I didn't want to imply dismissing the small numbers either. It's if you're only running this poll once,
it's millions of people, Mark. It's millions of people.
We came out with, ours was a self-reported, and so that's 6% of vaccinated, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We came out with a 7% self-reported major side effect rate. So all that question was, did you have a major side effect? And I would expect yours to be smaller because severe is a harsher word than major.
Yep.
And you made them read a definition, which makes them think about the question more, gives them, I think, more of an opportunity to like, maybe I didn't, right? So I think
that's what we were trying to do. Like, listen, don't tell me off the bat that you had a major reaction if you had a headache. You know what I mean? Or a severe adverse effect if you had a headache. This is what.
Well, my philosophy on that, because we got flack too for just saying, well, you let them decide what's major. And I was like, okay, like, again, where are the major corporate media pollsters, right? Like,
you do it then. You do
where
it.
Where are the scientific, nonprofits? Where are the, you go open an account on SurveyMonkey, right?
Right. They got a panel for you to use.
Yes. Prove us wrong.
And do you feel comfortable? If you don't, you don't. But what was your nasty gram from them? Like, what was it relating to?
Okay. Well, we were right, but it was we're the only people doing daily presidential approval.
That's right. You're the only one left.
We had that on our daily presidential tracking article page. And we said, since Gallup quit the field, it's like maybe an uncharitable reading of it is that they don't track presidential approval anymore. They don't daily, but so it's like, all right, we removed it.
But I read that a couple of times on Rasmussen, and I know clearly what you guys are talking about. They used to be a daily tracking poll. They no longer do it. They still have.
Yeah, we should be nice though and not throw shade.
But the truth is, they were scared out of the business. They were. I mean, they were spooked out of it. They don't do horse racing anymore. I honestly don't know what value a pollster has, Mark. And this is the last question I'll ask you, and I'll let you go because we're at 2:00, but we're at 2:03 actually. But what do you think the value? And maybe you agree, maybe you disagree with me. But I just don't see the value at all of a pollster who doesn't horse race, because if you're in the political sphere. If you're doing other studies, that's totally different. But if you're in the political sphere and you're doing issue polling, anything that could impact public policy, if you don't horse race, we only have one test of whether or not we're telling people the truth. And that's on election day, right? Were we relatively close to the election results or not? Like in Virginia, when we did the gender neutral bathroom polling, when we did the trans in athletic stories, when we did the polling on voter integrity, do you want different reforms? If we got Youngkin right, which we did, then obviously we were right about how we polled people's opinions on issues. If you're now Gallup and you just don't do horse racing, then how the hell do we know whether or not you're accurate at all, right? So to me, I just don't see the value in it. You have to put yourself forward with elections and take your lumps when you're wrong.
There's so many ways I could go at this. I don't want to like throw shade at any individual pollster, but if you look at them, they have a long reputation and history in the business. They probably charge 10 times what we do. And they will probably expect people to take their name as validation enough of the accuracy of the poll. And they charge top dollar for that.
Man.
And I guess that's great business when you can get it. But here's the thing, though, going back to that whole discussion we had about the just overwhelmingly oppressive alignment of non-ideological people to support an ideological, it's not a movement. I don't know even how to say this. Like part of the time I spend in my day is wrapping my head around what is going on psychologically in America right now. I probably should have had a psychology degree if I wanted to be a good public opinion pollster, right? I watch Russell Brand every once in a while. I read Curtis Yarvin stuff. It's like there's weird stuff like happening here. And so if you have a big reputation and you're a massive name, it's reasonable to expect that human beings in this country will be suspicious of the fact that you're not being transparent or telling the truth to them, right? And so that I think there's examples that abound of power structures being used against people's best interests, lying to them, being manipulated. Look at the banking industry. Like I used to work in the banking industry, right? Like perfect example. You put your money in a bank, you don't get any interest. They are trying to make it so that they can shut off your currency. Like, it's not in your best interest, right? Your best interest is probably to buy gold and stuff in a mattress, right? But the whole industry like thrives on that. So I don't want to get into all that, but I believe in my methodology. I'm not a liar. I don't play with the data. And so by doing horse races, I'm putting my reputation on the line every election season to show you that I think that my data is accurate. And the problem is that my reputation, as is yours, is now perpetually under attack. So the industry changed. It used to be different 20 years ago. You could literally just do robocalls. And, Scott Rasmussen was really good at it and called multiple national elections within like 0.2% of the national vote. And back then, he would get on Fox News because Fox News wanted to tell their audience what Americans thought. And now the news doesn't work that way. They don't want to tell you what America thinks. They want to tell you what to think. And because of that, when we go into those horse races, we're just giving them ammunition to undermine our reputation because polling is hard. We're not going to get it right all the time. No, we're going to have ridiculous calls sometimes. Our 2018 call was really off, and that's because we underestimated the ridiculous overperformance of Democrats. And how could we not miss that, right? And then it's like, oh, well, then they're going to cherry pick that result and hang it over your head. And the good news is that I feel like people in some respects are just not paying attention to them anymore, man. Like we did that It's Okay to Be White poll. I thought it was incredibly relevant results to the ongoing discussion of race in America, right? And then they wrote this nasty little snide hit piece in Washington Post, and nobody cared, and it didn't impact us at all, right?
Yeah, he's such a fool. And he attacked you over the Arizona poll too, which somebody did ask. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, we're talking about swing states. That's pretty relevant, right? Like, okay, it wasn't a horse race, but I went in and polled Arizona and released the results. And I think your viewers would find that they were pretty newsworthy and important. And it's like if nobody's doing horse races, right? Like we're part of the independent news media, and we're almost, I perceive us as like a fallback for journalists. So journalists are supposed to be holding these power structures accountable, and they are not. And so in the absence of that, at the very least, we can tell you you're failing. Like the American opinion is not so.
We wouldn't be here, Mark, if they were doing their job. I mean, that's just the truth of it. Or at least we wouldn't be as influential if they were doing their jobs. And that makes us, though, targets every single time. And by the way, You know, it's not just the media. A certain political campaign has launched a massive attack. They're emailing, texting people because, look, we had that primary poll come out. I never do this, you know, especially if you're in the middle of collecting. I will only put something up that I see before results are totally processed if I think that it's just really, really significant. So when we saw Trump, we had always had Trump in the primary lower than most people. And DeSantis was at like almost, you know, roughly around 30% at his high in hours. And so when I saw him fall, like he was about to drop below 20 and Trump, you know, inching closer to 60, that started a massive campaign against, you know, my record, which hasn't had any there. I don't know that there's anybody in the business who could seriously like attack they say they cherry pick, you know, but it happens on both sides as if, you know, we weren't the only one in 18 to show he was going to win that race, right? All of a sudden that goes away. That goes to the wayside. Philip Bump in that article on the Arizona poll attacked your methodology, not the results, the methodology, as if everybody doesn't know in this industry about debates over how to wait for party. I mean, but what you're doing is an outside the industry standard. And he made it out like it was an industry standard issue. It was not. I mean, so the being a pollster is like one of the
article. I was like, it's just going to make me mad. Why would I even bother? And then I finally was like, all right, I'll read it. And I struggle to recall a single valid point.
None.
Is it fair to represent it as just a string of logical fallacies? I mean,
I'll tell you, I went on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you, I went on War Room that day, and they were like, break it down for me. Is anything they did outside of the norm? You know, and I'm like, no, Philip Bump is an idiot. I mean, but he's been doing this for years, and it's not just Rasmussen, although he loves to focus on you guys.
Yeah, he does.
It's man, he's like obsessed.
So, what do they call him? Stans?
Yeah. Right. You know, and some of these other things, you know, I wrote an article about after 2018 with the one you just brought up, that the generic ballot. I mean, there were, if you're going to be honest, there were a couple of questions that we could seriously ask, but you can't just focus on a miss Rasmussen has without discussing. I mean, he acted like you guys were the only misses. You know, I don't know. I think my article is on your website, actually, about this. Yeah. I mean, because we published it originally in People's Pundit Daily, but you got to be kidding me. Let's look at your news organization, Philip. Here are your results from this cycle. And we went through all the states, CNN, Fox News, Marist poll. I mean, everybody at this, you know, was so off at the state level. They wanted to just focus on you with that one national poll. And that's the downside of being.
Well, in this cycle, there were some pretty funny calls too. And it's like, here's the thing, right? I hope that we can be forgiven for not predicting the fact that literally Democrats had a 1 century turnout, like 1 in 100 year turnout in 2018. And the fact that if to the extent to which people predicted it was mostly because they're like push polling for the Dems, right?
Right.
So, but here's the thing, every cycle is different and we're learning. And I think that the reason we'll continue to be relevant is like you're putting your face associated with this business. And as long as we have integrity, we're going into each of these elections and trying to do our best to be accurate and telling it to your face. We're not a nebulous corporate structure that is hiding behind, you know, brand or whatever. And we're very clear where our money is coming from. I think that's another important one, right?
People.
So we're subscription and advertising revenue funded. And if we ever have a sponsor, we tell you who it is. And that's not the way a lot, like, where did all that, let me ask you, you know more about this stuff than I did. Like the morning consult stuff, their vaccine tracker, they're polling like, was it like 10,000 a week or something? Like it was some ridiculous number and they're still doing it.
Yep.
Is that independent work? Is that embedded in other polls they're just running, or are they literally burning tens of millions of dollars?
This is what I don't think people understand. All right. What you're bringing up is a really important question. So if they have this larger poll that they're asking and entering these questions into every year, then where is this panel coming from? Is it their own panel? Are they re-asking the same people? What are they doing? And I can't give you the answer to that, Mark, because they don't give us the answer to it.
On the
right?
website, it looks like they say they're polling individual randomized like thousands of people a week, which if you do the math is literally north of like 10 million, 15 million bucks to do it.
Yep. And there's another pollster who claims that they are talking to hundreds of thousands. The panel is used. We have a panel. They'll give you. They had it before 2022, which is here's our generic ballot. Here's our different states, and it's like based on. And they have a what is the name of that? Tableau. They have a public dashboard through Tableau, and it's like based on 128,000 responses. And I'm trying to explain to people that is literally a $500,000 poll, if more, if it's just online. I mean, it's you're and over time, if you're going to be doing that, if that's true, and you have a weekly result, then you're what, a $30 million business? Like,
I don't know if our online panel even have like major national provider even has the depth to do that. Like,
no, Laura just said from the other room, nope. With marketplaces of panel providers provide, and you know this, they provide feasibility numbers every time you go in there. How many can I expect to receive? Yes. How many can I expect to receive over 3 days, over 5 days, over 7 days? There is not a single panel out there who will tell you they can gather that many responses for you in 3 days. It's just not there. And this is why I feel made one of the worst business decisions I ever made in my life, which is that in 2016, we built a voter file source panel. It was our panel, and we were trying to, but we did it it was an experiment. We were trying to show people the problems in modern world with randomized polling, and that, very much if you had a panel that was built where maybe 30% were repeat interviews of people, you were making sure they didn't change their mind, but these were people who agreed to participate, like the USCN Endorf, the RAND Corporation. We were trying to show the issues with response bias. I let that panel go. I should never have let that panel go, and should have just kept building and building and building. Because
I don't understand the philosophical aversion to maybe one of your human beings being the same person like after 3 months, right? Man, I'll tell you, the 538 guys just sent us an email to answer some questions for them. I don't even know if I'm going to write it back. They know what our methodology is, right? But I think
why would they be asking that at this point?
Well, probably because of the Arizona poll is my guess. But there's a couple of ways to like try and explain that away, right? There's the know the fact that a third of the voting equipment in Maricopa didn't work, and that like there were ballots printed. I won't get into it. But
yeah. I mean, right. It's a whole court case on this. I mean, we know it's established.
One way to explain that, or the other way is to meticulously pick apart and again cherry pick and try and like run somebody's reputation through the muck. And it's like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter too much to us. We're just going to keep doing what we do. But I think I said something. I've told you about this. Like we do like phone IVR. There's still 95 million people out there with landlines. And they're opinionated people. They like answering polls, and we're going to keep calling them. And for us, it's a huge cost saver, and it works, right? Like it's been working for now. We balance it out with online panels, as pretty much every other pollster uses multiple data sources now because you have to, right?
That's right, mixed mode.
But instead of the insanity of dialing 1,000 people to get one result, I said, well, like let's just go back and take every number from every person that's ever answered one of our polls and just call them, right? And then so it's like, oh, somebody at 538 is like, oh, is that a methodology shift? And it's like, no, I have 350,000 people that have answered a Rasmussen poll, which is twice as big as the entire online panel depth that every pollster in America uses, right? So it's like, don't try and come to me and say, oh, are their opinions going to change? And is it a panel? It's not a panel. Your online panel is a panel, right? It's not my phone. Like, back off. So
It still can be randomized, Mark. I mean, in truth,
we
if it's
were-
that big, there's no
right.
different than going to the voter file. And when somebody no longer has an accurate phone number, our system picks up that phone number is no longer associated with that voter, or not a voter at all anymore. So they're removed from the database if we can't update that information. Now, I randomly pick from it every time, but it doesn't mean we're not excluding, because the phone, it's different. So I'm pulling it from the database, but then I'm uploading it to our software, and our software is saying this person is an opt-out. They said, I no longer want to be called, or I'm on the do not call list. So they're removed. So in truth, that's not that much different. It's not, because you're just simply saying, right? If I understand you correct, you're saying I am just keeping people I know participate.
Yeah. I'm just changing the way I dial, still randomly selecting people from a mix of region, like balanced. You know what I mean? It's like I'm getting a random sample. So it's like,
it's still
like,
random.
Yeah. Like, let's talk about like the generic ballot for the 2022 election, or let's talk about the fact that I nailed Mark Kelly and Blake Masters in the same poll that you're upset about the Kerry Lake result. Like,
and somebody asked me actually to ask you how you got the same for Fincham, since the result was different. And I don't know that you can answer that on, here on this, because without, violating some guideline, just be careful.
No,
I don't.
I don't know.
Oh no, they nuked Mark. Oh no, he's back. I thought they nuked.
No, I asked human beings in Arizona who they voted for, and I feel confident that I will be allowed to tell you on YouTube what the results were of who the human beings told me they voted for. They told me that Kerry Lake was the governor by 8 points over Katie Hobbs. They told me that they didn't want Blake Masters. They had Mark Kelly winning by 4, I think.
It's about what he lost by.
4.3 or something. So exactly, right? And then we had Fincham up 3 and Hamaday up 6, I think. And peculiar. And once again, I'm not an expert in like Arizona electoral systems. I think you probably know a lot more than me. But I can tell you that what I think happened there was multifaceted and done in modicum to the extent needed, let's just say, right? So
I can tell you, I've done exit polls, Mark, everywhere. I've done exit polls everywhere. I have never had, because with exit polling, you do have to gather people who are going to participate in your exit poll. Finally, Edison and others now are not too different from voter analysis that's done by the AP and Fox, but we have always used this methodology, which, by the way, 530 and 8 and others smeared up until 2016. And then in 18, before the election, the AP and Fox announced that they were abandoning Edison and doing this new methodology, which was in fact our methodology. So it was garbage when we were doing it. And now it's like a standard. And nobody has ever acknowledged that that was in fact the PPD tracking poll in 2016. That's how we did it. Yeah. And we gathered people who would participate. If you were going to vote early or anytime, you're instructed to complete the questionnaire for the exit poll at the time you cast your vote. So if you voted by mail and you stuck it in the mailbox, go complete your questionnaire. If you drop it off at a drop box, go complete your questionnaire. We already knew, because we have intent questions. Do you intend to vote like this? So we kind of knew already how many people intended to vote on election day, how many intended to drop it off at a drop box on election day. We knew this, and those numbers were relatively all in line except for the election day. And when we looked at it, more than 90%, about 91% or so, who said they were going to vote and would participate in the exit poll, but they were going to vote by mail, they handed in their questionnaire. Those who told us they were going to vote by election day, only 71% told us. It was about a 21-point difference, so 92 to 71. That has never happened before. We've been doing this in multiple states all over the country. There has never been that big of a disparity. So to me, some in Arizona, and like you said, I think it's multifaceted, those people were not able to vote.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And we were getting, it was like 10 minutes after, Mark, 10 minutes after the first guy said, or 15 minutes after the first guy said, I'm sorry. I told you I would participate in your exit poll, but I tried to vote before work. Something's going on here. It's all messed up. I'll try to come back after work. That was the very first one. It was like 15 minutes after the polls opened. And he never came back, Mark.
Well, we saw the lines, like, but when I say multifaceted, like the part that I'm still relatively confused about how this could even happen is the spread between Blake Masters and Kerry Lake, which in official results was 4 points, and then in our results was like 12, right? So multiple times outside the margin of error, right? And it's like, how do they even? Well, we can't talk about it on YouTube, but
yeah. And it's funny because somebody just said this is a great conversation. I would love for them to do it on Rumble or something off YouTube so they can speak a little bit more frank. And maybe we'll do that.
Maybe we got to invite like Seth Keshel or somebody like that, right?
I know Seth. Yeah. And we should, 538 wants to ask about people's methodologies. I want to know about theirs. How can you possibly run a business if you're in the red to the tune of millions of dollars every year? Who is propping you up to make sure that you're still operating and getting paid because you have no revenue? They're talking about selling you again, so I'm with you. I just ignore the smears, man. And I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, because you're never going to please everybody. He's not an authority. If this turns out to be a smear, it's just not a viable source. He's never been a pollster. None of them have. So I don't know, where this came from, except for media narrative, going to what we've been talking about before. Why on earth is there any other business that you know of that bleeds red to the tune of millions every year and is still in business, Mark? I mean, that doesn't happen. It's the federal government. That's it. That's the only one, my friend. Well, I kept you way too long. It's 2:30. We're burning past even it's just that this was a rare chance to have this conversation. Yeah, so we should do it, on a non-YouTube area so we can have a more frank conversation.
Yeah, to be honest, I have less to offer and more to learn specifically about. I mean, we follow what's going on to the best of our abilities, but as far as like really tying it down to the theories and using it to understand the challenge, like the things we see in our numbers.
Yeah.
And I would want to start with 2018. Man, I went down a rabbit hole on that one. I downloaded all the congressional district voter turnout numbers for every cycle, going back all the way to like 2006 or something, and like looked at every single congressional district. Because I was like, no, it's got to be in like Detroit. It's got it. And no, it was across every.
It was across the board. It went vote. You know what we found in 2020? Barnes and I both did this, but he kind of pointed me in the direction. He was like, look, you got the tools. What we found is that because we looked in red states too, we wanted to. What we found is that there was a very clear correlation. If there was an increase from typical uses of mail-in vote, then there was an increase in turnout. So even in Tennessee and Kentucky, which provided great examples, you could have neighboring counties with almost identical demographics, but if it voted at a higher rate by mail, turnout increased more and support for a specific party was higher. So there was, Mark, you know what? Like I said, offer on another video, we should do this because I could show you some stuff. It's so very concerning, but also convincing. I point out to people this year, Virginia 2 versus Pennsylvania 5. I polled them both. Yes, Democratic incumbents. Hung Cao came very close, ultimately lost, even though the demographics are almost identical. And yet Mary Gay Scanlon was able to beat David Galuch by a similar margin, even though both of the polling showed that those Democrats were going to have closer races than expected. What was the difference? The increase in the vote by mail and drop boxes, the availability of drop boxes. That is the difference. And there's no other explanation. Both have the same, roughly same percentage of black voters, same percentage roughly of educated white voters. It just doesn't make sense. Some things are really weird, but Yeah, it was a total poll nerd fest. It was great. I'm loving that you're doing videos now. You said put your face to it. This is what I really think the transparency of what you're doing now is great, because that's been our philosophy for a long time. Tell people where they can follow along, what to expect, when to expect videos, stuff like that.
Sure. We've been 6 months now. We've been live with a YouTube channel, and we're still trying to work out our format. Mostly it's just short, like little 6-7 minute segments where I try and point out sort of what I think is the most interesting part about the polling internals. But we're polling out there every day. We got a pretty fun Twitter feed to follow. And at some point we'll probably start doing streams and stuff as well, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Got to figure out what people really want to go into, because I'll wonk out about this stuff all day. But
what's the handle for it? What's the YouTube channel? Everyone knows
Rasmussen _poll. And so you can actually get your hands on some of our crosstabs too. Even if you're not like a paid subscriber, it's usually only available to like platinum subscribers. But every time there's a sponsored poll, or for like some of the big ones, like the COVID ones, there'll be a link where you can click through and see the crosstabs. So if somebody wants to get a handle on some of our numbers too, just go to that YouTube channel and like search COVID. There's some interesting stuff to look at. Like the one last week about the vaccine deaths. So,
well, let me know if there's any way I can reciprocate if you end up doing longer, form YouTube videos, clips like that, and
yeah, cool.
I'd love to join you. So just let me know. I really appreciate you giving us so much time today, man. I hope you come back.
All right. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Mark Mitchell, everybody. That was a great conversation. Thanks, Mark. Rasmussen _poll across the board. Twitter, Getter. I don't know if they're on Truth. YouTube. I don't, honestly don't spend that much time on Truth. I've been more so now, though. I have been. But yeah, that's ridiculous. This is stuff that they've been subjected to. It's ridiculous. I mean, he said it, and I'm glad he was modest enough to say it, because I tell people this all the time. I've been very fortunate over more than almost 10 years of public polling, never to miss a single poll outside the margin of error, sampling error. And for the most part, calling every single race that is in the presidential field correctly, almost to the T. It's like I sold my soul to the devil, and eventually I was going to be wrong. So getting one poll wrong is still a pretty damn good track record. Rasmussen got 18 wrong, but then in 2020, damn near nailed it. And yet they still just keep and 2016, they nailed it. And by the way, going back to 2010, Rasmussen was the only pollster, which 538 trashed them for, said that's not possible. If Rasmussen is right, then Republicans would win something like 60 seats. Well, guess what? They won 63. Nobody ever talks about that. They just cherry pick the one that they don't like, the one mess up they think is possible, and ignore all of theirs, which is what I said. I said, I think the title of that column was, if Rasmussen reports is right-leaning, which is what Philip Bump said, they're right-wing polls. Look how wrong they were. If they're right-leaning, what the hell does that make you? ABC News, Washington Post, Biden plus 17 points in the state of Wisconsin. Their tracking poll had Hillary Clinton up 12 points a week before the election. I'm fine with taking lumps, but it's cuts both ways. I've never missed an election by 15 points. And by the way, they have the money to do something we don't. We don't have the money to do final polls everywhere we poll. So in we do, or we try to, in presidential cycles, and in the last two, we were able to do presidential cycle final polling, and was incredibly happy with our performance in 2020, highlighted by the New York Post as by far the most accurate one and the most transparent one. We were not able to do that in midterms. So they cherry pick a poll you release in September or something, or October, early October, when you did have the budget for final polls. What's your excuse? The only final poll we did was Ohio, which Laura got pissed at me for, because it was the first and only one. I just wanted to basically show that there is no way that Tim Ryan is tied with J.D. Vance. I mean, I just knew it in my gut. And of course it wasn't. What were we, Vance +6, +7, something like that? Whatever we were was tens of percentage points off of what it actually was in Ohio. Meanwhile, the New York Times consistently puts Ohio as competitive. They had Biden winning the state of Ohio in 2020. Iowa, and Pennsylvania by like 9 points. Not to, like you said, not to throw shade on it. It's like, but if you're going to smear and try to tear down other pollsters who are honestly trying to do the best job that they can do, then fine. But you got to take your lumps too. Right? All right. And by the way, to that little campaign that seems to be trying to trash my record, you didn't mind I was the only one who had you up in 18, right? You didn't mind that at all. And we were the only election projection model on the internet to have that race lean to Republican. Not even slightly leans, because we knew margin may be close, but the likelihood was understated, it was being understated by some of the polls out there, which I think Trafalgar was the only, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Trafalgar had him up too. Maybe. I'd have to go back and look. But back then, like I said, they thought he was MAGA, so they spiked the entire segment on Fox News. The only proof of that is my emails with Jerry Willis. All right. There was something else. Oh, so from now on, let me just say from now on, why did I do that in 18, not do final polling and did stuff before? Because I was trying to give an accurate assessment of where some of these races were at that time. And then some of them with CD Media, ironically, for instance, Pennsylvania, if you cut the locals poll and you just take the last public poll, like public, that we did in Pennsylvania, that had both Oz and Mastriano down. So, they really had to go digging for that puppy. But they were trying to give, again, another voice. What, about the state of the race. From this point on, when it comes to my own polling sponsorship, there's nothing I can do about that. If somebody wants to sponsor in September, they want to sponsor in September. But for my own, if I can't do multiple polls leading up to the election and I have to pick and choose, maybe I do one early, but then one final, then that's what we're going to do. Because I have to have a final in order to get, you understand what I'm saying? Like they're going to cherry pick. So being that I didn't do it the way I did for presidential cycles, I gave them ammunition to do that, but yeah, I'm not going to be doing that again. I'm going to be doing finals and that's it. Maybe we'll do something like pre-summer and then, you need to follow. Thank you, Laura. You need to follow through. And otherwise you're just giving, what are just enemies, just like nasty enemies who don't care at all about the state of the race or the truth, like Mark was talking about. They care about narrative. And you're just giving those nasty people ammunition. So I just can't do that anymore. Anyway, I was chomping during the breaks and during Mark's break on white cheddar. Uh-oh. This is pretty good. Not pretty good. Uh-oh is right. Come and try.
I know you were, and I heard you while you were chomping. You forgot to mute your mic at one point when Mark was talking.
Sorry. I thought I was doing a pretty good job of that. You're more than welcome to come and try some. It's delicious. It's right up there with sour cream and chives and dill. It is. It's so good. I love that those sultry flavors. Or savory is what I'm looking for. And absolutely delicious. Absolutely. So jamandbean.com, promo code TPP40. If you want to get that first subscription started, you'll get 40% off and still get 10% off your subsequent subscriptions. I would throw coffee in there too, though, if I was you. All right. They got K-Pods. They got fresh. The roasting is incredible. The beans are amazing. Speaking of which, I'm going to have to drink those soon because I don't want them I want them as fresh as possible. And thanks to everybody, at 4patriots.com, you could use the promo code TPP10 at checkout to get 10% off the Patriot power generator, the 3-month survival kit, anything on the site. However, I do suggest if you're going to get that 3-month survival kit, wait to see what you get with it. All right. Don't use a promo code on a $20 item is what I'm saying. All right. Unless that's all you're going to get. I'm just trying to give you my advice. And then, of course, our friends at fieldofgreens.com, Brickhouse Nutrition, promo code TPP, period. That's it. TPP. That'll get you started with 15% off. You will not be disappointed in any of them. All right. Send us your thoughts. Send us your feedback. We love to hear it. All right. So don't forget, no book club Sunday. However, because it's Easter Sunday, when we come back the next week, we'll be doing, and there's the new version of it behind me, The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, Bernard Bailyn. This is the old school original OG copy. That's the new one behind me. Then not this Sunday, but next Sunday, both on Locals and on YouTube. YouTube members, I'm going to send out a code to you on the community comments page that's only visible to YouTube paid members. That will give you a discount for Locals. All right. I know because you're paid on YouTube, but you never know. So maybe you're already a member on Locals, which you should be, peoplespundit.locals.com, because I can't communicate with you when something happens like it did last month where I get a stupid strike because Barnes and I, we're talking about the JFK assassination. I can't communicate with you when that happens. So sign up and become a member on Locals. And then I will give you a code if you want to become a supporter that will, give you a chance to you can keep both. I don't care. That's super supportive of you. But if you're trying to move over from YouTube where you're already paid to Locals, this will give you that will remove that cost that you had from YouTube. All right. And start you basically anew. And so instead of paying every month as a YouTube member, you can now come over to Locals. We are streaming directly to Locals now. So there's no difference. There's a great live chat, a great comment. If you super chat, we so much appreciate that. You can do it as a tip on Locals. We're trying to make this as easy as possible, but I really am stressing to everybody, please go and at least become a member on Locals so I can communicate with you when something like that happens. All right. And then plus, you're going to hear things about polling results that others don't. So when I'm in the field, like I am in Utah right now, and I'll be in and out nationally all the time, I see something, you're going to see it first. All right. So, and then supporters will see full results first. But it's a great community, great people, smart people. You'll love it. You will. All right. So everybody, I hope if you're Catholic, you have an amazing Good Friday. Spend it with the people you love. Go to service, whatever it is you have planned. I hope you very much enjoy it. And then, of course, on Sunday, I hope everybody has a fantastic Easter. For me, I love Christmas, but it's for me as if you're a Christian, it's really all about the resurrection. Had he not been resurrected, then maybe this movement called The Way would never have taken steam. I don't want to Bible thump. I'm just saying I wish you all very much a wonderful, beautiful Easter. All right. And those on Locals, if I can't find lamb sufficient, I won't be able to share this recipe with you. But I went to go get the lamb the other day and I didn't like what I was seeing. I'm going to go back. I'll hit up Publix. They never let me down. But I'm going to try to go. If I go to my local other store, I don't want to do them dirty and say it. But if I go to my other local one and I don't like what I'm seeing, I'll try to hit Publix up and then I'll share that recipe, the lamb recipe, like I promised with you. All right. So what, am I missing anything here, Laura? I don't think so. Right? Am I missing anything? Nope. Thank you to my special guests, John O'Shea. Again, honored for him to come on and announce here on Inside the Numbers. John for Texas, right? Or O'Shea for Texas.com. Go learn. I can tell you guys, I know you loved him when he was on before. It was an incredible conversation. I'm so honored to have him on and announce that here. The country's going to need a new generation of leaders to step forward. And it sucks because it's a horrible business to get into. I'm not even going to lie to you. It's a miserable business to get into. In fact, a dangerous one at this point. But that's what it's going to take because this generation that's currently here now is not big enough to rise to the occasion. We're going to go down. All right. So thank you to John O'Shea for coming by. Wish him all the best. Go check him out. Mark Mitchell gave us over an hour. It was amazing of him. I think he gave us over 2 hours. I don't even know. It's like 2 hours of talk time. Thank you, Mark. Hope you come back. Rasmussen poll. Rasmussen reports. It's Rasmussen_poll on social media. And we will see you guys super soon. Thanks again. All the best. Deuces. Right, Laura?
Deuces.
Deuces.
Happy Easter. Say happy Easter.
Happy
Easter.
Oh, that's my boy. Love you, Roro. See you guys soon. All the best.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna